Devil S. So do you use suction cups or glue or tape to achieve the desired effect? No, Naruto answered, looking down and at the soles of his feet to show there was no adhesive along them. He placed them back on the ceiling and remained hanging upside down. I just use my chakra and I stick to the walls and stuff. That is amazing. Real ninja stuff. The bespectacled otaku marveled at the sight of Naruto hanging from the ceiling like it was nothing. Hyodo-kun. Kaneko-chan. When you said you knew a real ninja, I have to admit I was a bit skeptical, but he's actually real. Don't worry, Morisawa-san. Honestly, I didn't even believe he was a ninja either when he first told me. Issei chuckled heartedly and ignored Naruto's middle finger in response. But when you told me you were playing ninja games recently, I thought you'd like to meet one yourself. Well, that's thoughtful, Hyodo-kun, but, the ninja games I was talking about were a little more risque and bouncy. The man looked over to the side and the three students noticed the pile of Senran Kagura games piled up by the console. I was hoping more for a cute, busty, air-headed young ninja girl to come visit rather than some older Yankee. Yep, because a cute, busty, air-headed ninja girl would be way more into your lechery. Kaneko monotoned as she picked up one of the cases for the games and looked at the descriptions. These girls were her age. And they looked like they were smuggling squishy watermelons in their shirts. Well, the ones that were at least decent enough to wear a shirt. The freshman pouted and tossed the case to the side. Whatever. Sorry, Morisawa-san. If I ever find a busty ninja girl, I'll convince her to come over and visit. Issei said before staring ahead blankly. On second thought, I would rather keep any cute ninja girls with sweater puppies to myself. Damn you, Hyodo-kun. I can turn into a ninja girl if you really want to see one. They all turned to Naruto as he stared back from his spot on the ceiling. The blonde shrugged. If you're seriously asking, I can use a transformation technique to turn into a girl so you can see one. You can turn into a girl? Well, not like actually make myself a female or anything. I just look like a girl. I'd be an illusion. Kaneko looked mortified by this knowledge. Why are we only now hearing about this? Well, I used to use a technique where I'd surprise people by turning into a naked woman or a dozen naked women and surrounding them. Kaneko looked horrified to hear him say that, and even Issei and Morisawa looked a little judgmental. Naruto scratched his head meekly. Yeah, I did a bunch of stupid shit when I was younger. I'm trying not to use it now, and to be honest, I wouldn't put it past anyone in this world to molest me even though they'd know I was a guy. Could you imagine Issei using that stripping attack or boob communication on me? I would never use it on a guy. Naruto closed his hands together and concentrated before his body was engulfed in a cloud of smoke. A figure released its hold on the ceiling and dropped to the floor before standing back up. It was Naruto, but with a slimmer, leaner body, some curve to the hips and chest, and a softer, more feminine face. The new blonde had longer lashes, the clothes were a little more baggy, and had enough hair to separate into twin tails. Holy shit! Morisawa cried out as he examined the blonde girl that appeared in his room. You were serious? Boobs and ass and curves and everything, and a ninja to boot. This is the absolute best. Still a guy, calm the blood flow. The female Naruto stepped back defensively as the bespectacled man started to pant and fantasize to himself. He looked around and saw Kaneko staring at him blankly. Specifically at his transformed body. Kaneko, are you okay? So this is what you look like as a girl. The white-haired freshman noted in a dull voice before her eye twitched. Did you have to make the tits so big? This was my countermeasure against perverts, so it just seemed effective. She continued to frown at his excuse before he sighed. Please don't hate me. Issei, what else should we? It looks so convincing. And that just makes it so much worse. This is wrong. WWRRROONNNNNGGGG? Yeah, Naruto nodded. I should keep this locked up while I'm in this world. Devil, I can't believe you made a technique like that when you were just a kid, senpai. Maybe you're even more of a pervert than I gave you credit for. I am not a pervert and I am not like you. I made that jutsu up to fight against perverts. Sounds like the denial and deception of a truly depraved pervert. Kaneko muttered as she held Issei's back while riding down the street on his bike. Seriously, you deflect like those guys getting accused on TV. Look, I know how bad it seems looking back, but it was just a move I used as a kid. I barely ever even used it in battle. The whiskered blonde defended himself as he ran along the walls by the street and rooftops of houses Issei's bike passed by. I mean, I didn't use a naked harem of people to interrupt a fight or save the world or anything.
I'm thankful for that. Kaneko nodded. I have a lot of respect for you, but it would be seriously damaged if you turned into a bunch of naked men or women to win a fight. That'd be like an Issei senpai level of disgusting you'd resort to. I'd never go that far. Hey. Naruto blew a raspberry as Issei fumed and started pedaling faster. The ninja and the pervert seemed to be racing each other down the street to win whatever competition this was supposed to represent. Kaneko remained balanced on the back of the bike seat as they sped down. She shook her head in disbelief that this would settle any argument they had about perversion or.
Kaneko's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing in thought. She looked back in the corner of her eyes before focusing forward. Issei-senpai. Yeah? Bring out your gauntlet. Huh? Issei slowed down and looked back at his younger friend. What do you mean, Kaneko-chan? Is something? Don't stop. Issei looked over and saw Naruto was still running along the wall, but his intense expression from partaking in their impromptu race had changed into one of stern focus. Issei decided to follow his ninja friend down the street and around the corner as Kaneko continued to hold on tightly. As they continued to ride down the street, Issei summoned boosted gear over his arm and prepared for whatever it was they were sensing. They came to an old, rundown building that Issei remembered them visiting once before when they had to chase down a stray devil in the area. It was abandoned and empty, so no one would be walking through here or be curious enough to look around if something happened here. As Issei pulled up and Kaneko jumped off the back of his bike, Naruto had created a clone and ordered it to jump into the scaffolding to wait. They slowly turned towards the entrance before Kaneko's ears and tail sprouted out. We know you're there. So come out already so we can see you.
After Kaneko's challenging remark, there was a dead, nearly eerie silence that hung over the empty building they had retreated to. Not even a breath was taken between the three of them before something finally changed. A shadow loomed through the entrance of the building as if it were actually sapient. Slowly the black figure took more of a definitive, human shape until the shadow pulled away. It revealed the young man using the shadows as a cloak to hide himself in, dressed in a dark school uniform and pushing his glasses back up his nose. Beside him several other boys and girls emerged to face the three devils.
Naruto's attention went to the man weaving shadows around his body like fabric. He summoned his sacred gear on his arm and whispered, Kurama, any idea? I'm sensing them right now and there's nothing different about them. Meaning? They're not devils or angels or fallen angels or gods or demigods or whatever else they could possibly be. They're human. Naruto was surprised to hear that, and Kaneko and Issei noticed his look. They're humans. Issei was shocked to hear that, while Kaneko had probably already sensed it with her senjutsu. Once they had squared up, Naruto spoke out to the gathered humans. I'm not sure what it is you want, but I promise you this isn't a fight you want to be a part of. Actually, it is. One of the young men said as he spoke up for his group. If anything, we just didn't expect this fight to happen so soon. We were planning to fight all of the members of Rias Gremory's group, but apparently we were just spotted a little too soon. How did you know we were there? I'm attuned to the nature and energy around me. Kaneko answered as her ears slightly flicked on her head. I felt something was following us for a bit when we were in the street. I thought we had concealed ourselves. One of the girls said, her voice having an accusatory edge as the shadow user shrugged in response. Her eyes focused on Naruto. And what about you? Did you notice us through our energies too? No, I felt your intent. The whiskered pawn smirked at them. Word of advice for the future. When you're tailing someone you plan to fight, don't imagine how you're going to fight them. That desire to attack and kill leaks out and people sensitive to it will notice right away. Might as well have a neon sign over your heads that says, I'm sneaky, so don't do that. Damn it, I guess we need to practice our subterfuge a little more next time. One of the young humans said in annoyance before looking around at her comrades. She noticed one boy just staring ahead at the group of devils in silent shock before she smacked his shoulder. Hey, what are you spacing out about? It's him. The young man said in disbelief. When some of the other gathered humans were confused by what he was referring to before he desperately continued. I mean, come on, that can't be a coincidence, they look the same. Issei and Kaneko looked over at Naruto to see he was as befuddled by their conversation as they were. The whiskered ninja shook his head. Who the hell are you people anyway? We are members of the Chaos Brigade. Chaos Brigade? Issei groaned. What the hell are you doing here? Come to get revenge for that Beelzebub dickhead and his team of pricks? I didn't think they'd be recruiting humans once they were out of devils. We are not here to avenge those foolhardy devils that were just vying for a throne that was no longer theirs to claim. We are here on behalf of a far more noble group and worthwhile goal. We are here on behalf of the heroes. Naruto and Issei looked to each other. Heroes? Legends speak of warriors that stood up against the greatest, most daunting of challenges head-on and conquered them like none before. Men and women who have committed such deeds and feats of epic proportion that their names continue to reverberate through modern history. Even though they were humans, thought to be the weakest and most fragile race in the world, they forged names and monikers that demanded recognition. These were what were called heroes, and I believe these people are attempting to forge their own legends by defeating those they deem evil. These guys want to become heroes. Issei looked down at his gauntlet after Diedrich had finished clarifying who they were up against, so that means if they're hunting us to get their glory. We're trophies. Kaneko frowned. I don't like that. Although you might consider it flattering. Naruto lowly chuckled before he stepped forward. If you're looking for great evil to triumph, I don't we're the ones you should be going after. You're gaining power at an alarming rate and one of you is the new generation Red Dragon Emperor. They responded. This kind of growth and power in the hands of devils can only be considered dangerous. One of the young humans pulled out a weapon and charged forward, so we need to stop you now before it's too. Naruto skipped forward to cross the distance, his leg blurring up and striking the ambitious hero across the cheek and knocking them unconscious. The other's heroes stilled and watched the blonde devil slowly lower his leg and click his heel against the concrete. He reached behind his back and pulled out his knife, twirling it along his fingers before sharply grasping it. I don't know whether it's too late or not, but it definitely isn't going to be easy for you kids to get our heads. Balance breaker. Issei's body was wreathed in red aura before it disappeared and left him in his scale mail. The instant it did, the heroes took that as their signal to charge and attack. They ran forward en masse and attempted to overwhelm the three devils with their numbers. Naruto wasn't intimidated and charged forward to meet them. He parried and riposted their weapons with strikes of his knife, and countered with quick jabs and kicks. His attacks were fast and not devastatingly powerful, but with his dodging and attacking back he was easily keeping all the oncoming foes at bay. For the few that evaded his incoming attacks and charged into his guard, they were met with a fireball to the chest or an electric shock thanks to his demonic power. Kaneko let out light yells and grunts as she punched her foes away. With her enhanced strength thanks to her rook piece and the power granted to her through senjutsu, she was swatting away her enemies with barely any effort. She caught blades and spears between her hands and snapped off the metal before retaliating with a kick to the stomach. Issei on the other hand didn't need to parry or dodge the attacks because they simply bounced off his scale mail. His armor was too tough and sturdy for the paltry attacks to do any real damage to it. When the physical attacks proved worthless, some of the other heroes started to recite incantations and release magical attacks to overpower the perverted pawn. But even then it was futile as his armor endured and he passed through their efforts. He knocked them around with a wave of his arms, holding back and fretting that if he wasn't careful he might end up killing all these humans with minimum effort. Hyaa. Issei was throwing a punch but had to quickly lurch back as a shadow weaved out of the ground and shot for his head like a long black blade.
Shadows continued to rise up from the ground and spread out to do the same for Naruto and Kaneko. The devils were separated from the young, aspiring heroes they were beating back by a veil of moving shadows between them. The shadows then started to form into the shapes of people that stood across from them. Issei raised his fists. This seems way stronger than the rest of those guys.
Everyone, step back. The shadow user as well as three other heroes stepped forward as the other members retreated back behind them. Shadows continued to rise up as if they were alive as the three heroes prepared for battle. Two of them gaining bows while the third's hands were engulfed in blue fire. We will handle things from here on out. So, Naruto spoke to his comrades, it isn't just me, right? No, these four are much stronger than the rest of them. Kaneko agreed, and they are sacred gear wielders to boot. Just so you know, that explanation you had earlier wasn't totally accurate. The shadow wielder corrected as his shadows continued to spread out and take form. Some of us are trying to gain the title of hero, while some of us are just continuing the family tradition. We have the blood of heroes coursing through our veins, so beating and killing monsters and demons is second nature for us. So don't expect an easy fight from here on out. Two shadows raised up in front of the bow wielders and they jumped inside, disappearing from sight when the shadows lowered. Once they were gone, the hero summoning blue flames threw a jab forward and created a pillar of flame towards the devils. Naruto and Kaneko leapt back as Issei charged forward and took the flames head-on. The blue flames raged on and died out, but there was no damage to Issei's armor as it was extremely flame-resistant. His demonic power gathered in his hand before he launched his attack. Dragon Shot. The green beam shot forward but flew into a shadow in its path and completely disappeared. Issei exclaimed in his armor, "What the fuck was? Gaah. Senpai." Kaneko called out as Issei's attack reappeared behind him and left severe damage on his back. As she ran over to check on him, Naruto scowled and focused his power into his hand. Concentrated orbs of fire, electricity, and wind formed between his hands before he tossed them at the heroes. 3 more shadows sprouted up and swallowed the attacks. Naruto's eyes widened as he ducked forward and avoided the lighting ball flying up from his shadow towards his back. He immediately jerked his upper body back and dodged the wind ball coming towards him from the shadows along the wall. He raised his guard and prepared for the fireball to come next, but heard a faint pop by his side and looked over. Kaneko had her hand raised and smoke coming off her palm after blocking the surprise attack from her shadow. She looked over at him. "Can you please not supply them with ammunition?" He tried to pass it off with an apologetic smile before she noticed a glint behind his head. "Senpai, look out." Naruto's body moved on reflex and his leaned away from the green arrow of light that flew by his face. However, it flew into his shadow on the ground and emerged from the wall at his side. He turned around quickly enough and destroyed the arrow with a sharp, powerful swing of his knife. Another arrow, this time made of blue light, flew down from the ceiling to skewer him as well. Naruto yelled and swung up to destroy it as well, but it turned in the air and honed in on his temple. The whiskered blonde had no other choice but to catch the projectile in his hand before it could pierce him. He did it, stopping it only centimeters from sliding through his skull. But the light properties of the weapon reacted with his devil physiology and caused his hand to start smoking.
"Senpai, are you okay?" Issei asked as he recovered and lifted himself up. "You can't let those light attacks touch you."
"Yeah, just a reflex," Naruto said with a hiss, letting his injured hand hang at his side as he scowled. "This shadow game shit is going to be a pain in the ass." He smirked and created another ball of demonic power. "Looks like I've got no choice." "Damn devil. Did the last exchange not teach you anything? Your attacks can't escape from my shadows." "I know, and I'm not aiming for you." Naruto lobbed his attack up towards the scaffolding. The two bow wielders prepared to change position before they realized his attack wasn't going anywhere near them. But they panicked when they finally noticed the blonde clone meditating out of their line of sight and was popped by the elemental attack.
Naruto's body was filled with natural energy as his eyes changed and Sage Mode was activated. Issei stepped forward, the eyes of his helmet glinting as he decided he wasn't going to hold back anymore. And finally Kaneko slowly moved to join them, her eyes changing colors as her body started to release faint blue flames.
The flame-wielding hero threw his arms forward and released a powerful stream of fire at the devils. Kaneko did the same, releasing her own blue flames that collided with the heroes and raised the temperature of the room they fought in by several dozen degrees. As Kaneko held off the flame wielder, Naruto and Issei dashed around and rushed him from the sides. Shadows rose up in front of them and dozens of blue and green arrows rushed out to riddle them. Issei's Ascalon popped out of his gauntlet and he swung it around in a mighty arc, shattering and deflecting the blue arrows before they could hit him. Naruto opted to dodge instead of intercept, leaning back and weaving around the green arrow barrage. Even when they turned or twisted in the air, Issei and Naruto were able to handle the barrage of blue and green arrows handedly. Kaneko increased the intensity of her flames and was able to match the sacred gear's output enough to stall it for a moment. In that instant the Nekomata slipped forward and jumped over Naruto and Issei's heads. She extended her hands and released two powerful bursts of flames into the shadows that clashed with the light arrows coming out of them. Gah! This caused a strange reaction that made the shadows shift, constrict and tremble. They also heard the shadow user yell and cry out in pain as whatever happened in his shadows was affecting him. In response, the flame hero stood up to protect him and launched another wave of fire at the devils. Issei stomped his foot and braced his arms, letting the mighty wave of blue flames wash over like a blazing tide. As the fires covered Issei but failed to burn him, Naruto decided he would use this opportunity to gain the upper hand.
He closed his eyes and started to focus his demonic power into his right hand. The image of pure, untouched light traveled through his body, down his right arm, and into his hand. And when it came out, that energy started to take the form of jumping and frantic electricity.
He thought back to what Rias had told him before about how his demonic power was altered and enhanced by his Sage mode. Since then he had been practicing when he had the free time to try it out, and remembered the other times a simple concentration of demonic power had become far more potent while he was using Sage mode. The natural energy in his body amplified the demonic power he molded from his spirit, and made it far more powerful. It's what changed the simply ball of electricity in his hand into a lightning bolt that violently snapped and crackled with untapped energy. In Naruto's other hand he formed two balls of wind that were rapidly getting faster. He leapt up behind Issei, jumping over the blue flames that swathed over him and lobbed the wind attacks at the heroes. He made sure to stagger their launch, throwing one ball ahead of the other as they sailed straight towards the shadow wielder. The weary hero raised his shadows and swallowed the wind attacks one after the other. The moment they disappeared, Naruto focused his senses and concentrated as he dropped down through the air. He felt one of his attacks come flying out of his shadow and turned in the air to avoid its path. And when he felt the other one start to re-emerge, he twisted his body and aimed at the shadow. Lightning's crash, he threw the lightning bolt towards the shadow in time for it to collide with the incoming wind attack. They too exploded violently inside the shadow and caused the shadow user to scream in pain again as the shock went through his entire system. The pain was enough to floor him completely, and caused the flame wielder to stop attacking for a moment to help his comrade. With the two heroes occupied, Kaneko spread out her wings and flew up in the air. Closer to the scaffolding, she spotted the bow-wielding heroes hiding in the shadows and worried about their teammates. With them distracted, Kaneko released a rush of blue flames in their direction. The heroes were forced to jump down to avoid being burned by the flames from the white-haired Rook. Once they landed, all four of the Sacred Gear heroes were gathered together in a group. Behind them, the other less powerful members of their group squeezed together. The shadow wielder was helped to his feet and with a pained expression snarled out his threat. "Just you wait. You won't be so lucky with the true heroes of our group." "Bring it on," Issei yelled. "We can handle anything you wannabes can throw at us." "No, you can't." He waved his arm up and the shadows swallowed all of them. They melted back into the ground and all the members of the heroes' faction were gone. Once their enemies were gone, the trio of devils finally took a moment to let out a breath of relief. They looked around at the ruined building and all the damages it had now due to their battle. "So, we're gonna have to explain this when we get back, huh? Devil, I guess you finally had a run-in with the hero faction. You knew about this? I've been getting reports." Azazel answered as he sat around the room with his students, typing away on his laptop with great focus as he spoke. "Some of my sources have been taking notice that descendants and spiritual successors of ancient heroes have been disappearing from their former posts and appearing around certain areas that had been attacked." Rias frowned. "What are we dealing with exactly? The next generation of heroes coming to change history?" Azazel looked up from his screen to address the orc properly. "These are the blood relatives and descendants of the heroes of legend and history. Young humans that have taken on the names and titles of their ancestors and aim to match the level of their victories. Valley has a friend on his side, Arthur, who is the direct descendant of King Arthur from Arthurian legend. I remember hearing so much about those stories." Irina said in surprise before she looked around. "King Arthur's legends are famous around the world, and they have withstood the test of time. If someone has taken up his name and continued his fighting, he's gotta be pretty strong." Naruto and Kaneko thought back to the bespectacled man that had interrupted their fight with Biku and Kuroka. using 2 swords to cut through space and stop a Rasen shuriken in the air. If that's a standard of strength we're going to fight, we might be in trouble. Akano looked over at the fallen angel. So what are we looking at in terms of enemy forces? That's kind of difficult to quantify. Azazel responded with a shrug. It isn't like the old Satan faction, which was filled with the descendants of former Mao and their retainers, along with any other disgruntled devils that didn't like the current system. Heroes are harder to pin down. The fallen angel narrowed his eyes as he typed away. Depending on the hero and how much they slept around, they could have who knows how many descendants. Not to mention people that have become successors or spiritual mediums for other heroes to use. And along with powerful individuals who want to be heroes, the rough number could be much bigger than we expect. I mean, they've already started making moves and attacking certain areas to get our attention. They have? Xenovia spoke up. Then why haven't we been fighting back against them? We have. We've had teams respond quickly to the calls and engaged them in battle everywhere. The attacks have been quick, but they haven't done much damage as of yet. Oh, well, that's good. Gasper mumbled as he perked up with hope. That means they aren't nearly as bad as that other faction, right? I didn't say that. Azazel warned, causing the teens to look at him as he looked up from his screen. The attacks haven't been damaging, but they have been incessant. Just when we think we can relax, they attack a different area or outpost we aren't anywhere close to. And we haven't been able to capture any of them yet because they escape before they get overwhelmed. So they might not have the same raw power or numbers as the old Satan faction, but they don't need to have that kind of clout. Yuto cupped his chin as he thought. They can't launch big raids like the old Satans, so instead they opt for quick hit and run attacks instead. Issei shrugged. Yeah, but they haven't really done anything yet. That might not be the point. Yuto countered. Instead of just attacking us, what if they are testing us? Seeing how we react and respond to constant attacks and measuring our forces when they fight. You said the group that attacked you, Kaneko-chan, and Naruto-senpai were originally just surveilling you, right, Issei-kun? They said that, yeah. Issei thought back to their fight last night before it hit him. Are they seriously just testing the waters like that? They're confident enough to challenge the Sekiryute and a group of youngsters at the center of all the big changes in our reality now. And they're doing it without revealing their hands or using any of their toughest members. Azazel chuckled. They might not have the same numbers as the old Satan team did, but these brats are thinking pretty strategically. Have a little more brain and presence of mind than just attack all the leaders when they can and then storm enemy lines hoping for the best. We're gonna want to keep an eye out for these guys from now on. Azazel-sensei? Asia sat up from her spot and looked over at the fallen angel as he continued to focus on his screen. Are you collecting data or messaging someone about the attack? No, I did that earlier. The students looked over as his fingers continued to dance over the keyboard like he was possessed. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Then what the fuck are you so focused on exactly? He stopped and snickered before clicking on something. A lot of important stuff actually. Replies to people I work with. Grading papers and homework. And right this moment, he spun the computer around and smirked. I'm checking out our little pet project. P-P-P-P-P-A-I. Go. Opie Dragon. Save the breast kingdom from the monsters. Of course, princess. Booby beam. Rias hid her face in her hands and sighed heavily as the actress bearing a remarkable likeness to her bounced in her dress and called for the red-armored hero to charge their enemies. The hero easily knocked the small monsters and creatures away with flashy choreography and blazingly bright attacks. The Gremory Harius's ears started to burn in response. Turn that off. Ah, come on, we should be proud. These first few episodes are a massive hit. Opie Dragon's show has become a cultural phenomenon around the underworld and people are loving your characters. The responses online have been super favorable. Merchandise with your face on it is already flying off the shelf. Yeah, I've seen the t-shirts. Pictures of my face splayed across the front saying, I bet yours still aren't as big as mine, are you crazy? That's not exactly what the shirt says. It's pretty close but not exactly. Shouldn't you be happy so many people love you? Not if all they love me for is my constant orders about breasts. Rias argued before she heard a small snicker to the side. Her eyes narrowed. Akano. Have something to say. En no bucko. The queen struggled to calm herself and covered her mouth. Not at all. Surrender, villain. This is your defeat. Nah, don't feel like it.
Now the Opie dragon was facing a familiar blonde enemy. The whiskered actor had frog-like contacts in his eyes, with a bored, apathetic expression on his face.
The Breast Princess was the monarch of the Breast Kingdom. The Opie dragon was its sworn protector. And its mortal enemy was the lazy sage who attacked them constantly. This caused a violent but subdued reaction from the whiskered devil the character was based on. He clenched his fists together tightly and shook with barely contained fury as his likeness was used in the children's program about tits. If he had to suffer any more humiliation because of this damn show. UFU. And with a quick slip from a Kano, he fucking raged. Devil, Kaneko re-entered the clubroom after her classes had ended early. Gasper had promised to drop in soon but needed to do some work on his laptop first before meeting up with everyone again. The freshman thought she would be alone in the room, but was surprised to see Naruto already taking a seat on the couch. Senpai? Hey, welcome back. Skipping classes again? I thought you would have learned from last time. No worries, he grinned. I left a clone to suffer in my place. I get all the learning and I don't have to even sit in class. Have my clones back is awesome. You are seriously a terrible influence. She agreed as she came over and sat in his lap. Naruto had been surprised all the time when she had initially started following up on her vow to sit in his lap when she could. But now he had gotten so used to it that he expected it whenever they were in a room together. She got comfortable before looking over her shoulder. So how does it feel to be a celebrity in the underworld now? Hey, don't think you can go making jokes like that without punishment. He threatened rather harmlessly to his dear friend as she showed a tiny smile. Plus it isn't the same for me. Rias and Issei's characters are adored. But the sage is a bad guy so people don't really like him. All the fans that responded with love for Rias' character demanded my guy get his ass kicked. Wow, almost sounds like you actually care about your character in the boob show. Shut up. Hey, you two are together. Awesome, glad we could get a moment to chat. The two looked down at the lights on Naruto's arm as Kurama's voice sounded out of it. What's up, Kurama? We got something we want to talk with you about. Can you two close your eyes and clear your minds real quick? Naruto and Kaneko shared a look before they complied. Naruto leaned back in the couch and closed his eyes and Kaneko did the same to his chest. Soon enough the two devils had started drifting out of their consciousness and into a deeper one. When they opened their eyes they were standing in a vast, empty dark place. And they were surrounded by a giant fox, giant cat, and a giant turtle. The fox greeted them with a grin. Welcome to our little home. Oh man, I can't believe I'm back here. Naruto turned around and looked up at the Biju. Glad to see you two are doing okay. The Gremory territory has been treating me very well. Matabi's tail swished wistfully behind her back. This nice maid woman named Graphia regularly visits with her son and brings me heaps of food I can try. I don't usually have to eat but what she brings me is really tasty. I'm glad you're okay, Matabi. Kaneko walked up to the giant two-tailed cat and allowed her own ears and tail to sprout up. But what is this place? It's a level of consciousness shared between us Biju that we and our Jinchuriki can come to whenever or wherever we want. Since we revived, we have all been conversing down here to try and better understand the new world we live in. I guess that explains why you've been ducking out more recently. Kurama snickered and Naruto shrugged before he sat down between the towering beasts. But if this helps you acclimate a little better, then I'm glad to see you guys talking it out. Kaneko came over and sat down in his lap as well as they looked up at the giant beasts. So what did you want to talk to us about? Get a load of this. Turns out Isobu nearly started a fight in his new region. What? You're a jerk, Kurama. The three-tailed turtle groaned and looked down at the devils. It was almost a fight. And I didn't even start it. Well, what happened? So I traveled to the bottom of their sea and started to get comfortable. The water was kinda cold but I got used to it. Fish, sharks, whales, the lot of them swimming past. But then I'm faced with this giant serpent-like dragon that glares me down. Midgard Sormer. Naruto looked down at Kaneko as she spoke, a dragon king that resides in the north. He's supposed to be the largest dragon in existence, and he slumbers in the oceans and waits. Yep, that's him. He was so big even I was dwarfed in size, which was a new experience for me. Isobu yawned. And I told him who I was and he told me about himself. I said I would be living here from now on. He didn't seem to like that very much, his body coiled like he was gonna strike. I prepared to fight. He yawned. I did too. We sat down and drifted to sleep. And that's pretty much that. Wow. I never would have thought a tale about two giant monsters about to fight could end so boringly. Naruto drawled as Kaneko nodded in agreement. I guess that non-fight wasn't really anything to be worried about at all, huh? That's what I thought, but apparently just the fact we could have fought was some kind of big deal. Isobu begrudgingly moaned. My Jinchuriki nearly had a panic attack when I told her what happened. Although that might just have been because I was speaking into her mind and she didn't expect it. What? Naruto yelled, causing Kaneko to flinch and cover her sensitive ears after he had yelled so close into them. He quickly apologized and looked back up at Isobu. Isobu, you have a Jinchuriki too? Yep. Matabi told me while we were down here and said she picked out a person and passed some energy into them before they ended up connected. I offered the old man that was bringing me to the ocean but he kinda unsettled me, so I gave it to someone else. Shit, Isobu do not make anyone else a Jinchuriki. Things were complicated enough when people sealed you guys into humans to make them possible war machines. It's just gonna get even more complicated if you can make people super powerful with just a connection of energy. Okay, I won't do it anymore. But I've done it once and I don't think I can take that back. That's fine. Naruto let out a breath of relief before continuing, so what do you think about your new Jinchuriki? Neo Jinchuriki. Don't start using that term or it'll go to Azazel's head. What else am I supposed to call myself? I don't really know, the turtle answered uncertainly. She freaked out when I gave her my power and she's panicked whenever I speak in her consciousness. Do you warm her when you do that? Should I have? The devils sighed and shook their head. I think I need to speak with this person and try to ease them into this properly. The Biju looked down at them. Do you want to meet her? I can bring her down here if you like. Oh yeah, that'll definitely help. He smiled down at the Nekomata on his lap. She might be freaked out at first, but if we explain to her what is happening then we might be able to meet up here more often. Sure, Kaneko agreed. A regular meeting for Neo Jinchurikis sounds like a good idea to build better relationships between each other. I love your enthusiasm, but please don't make that term a thing. She's coming. The thing about the Biju's shared consciousness was that it took the Jinchurikis' consciousness from what they were currently doing and brought it down there to join them. So what it was they were doing at the time would reflect on what was shown down there. Since Naruto and Kaneko were dressed in their school uniforms, they appeared in the space in their school uniforms. So when Roswise was pulled down to join them while she was taking a shower, she was about as naked as the day she was born. MMM. The lovely silver-haired Valkyrie hummed a merry tune as she worked her hand on the shampoo in her hair. She sighed contentedly as she kept her eyes closed and rubbed some of the soap over her body as well. Her hands gently ran over her huge breasts and along her curvaceous, wet body as she let the stress from the day wash away with the water. It was only after a moment that Roswise realized there was no more water pouring down from her shower. She opened one of her eyes and looked up at the showerhead. When she did, she was met not with the shower from her hotel room, but three giant animals that looked like crazy versions of a fox, cat, and turtle. After a moment of silence, she slowly looked down to see a white-haired girl with cat ears staring up at her naked body in shock and disbelief. And, of course, the familiar whiskered blonde who was currently sitting down and in direct line with her nether region. So this is my Jinchuriki. Isobu innocently continued as if nothing was wrong. She told me her name was Roswise, but I don't know much else about her. These are my friends. Roswise let out a shrill, ear-shattering scream that nearly floored the devils and the Biju around her. She immediately dropped to the ground and covered her crouch and breasts in a panic. What is this? Where am I? Why I am surrounded by monsters? Why is Naruto-kun here? Why am I naked? Why am I showing people my naked body? This wasn't how it was supposed to be. What is?
Isobu, send her back. Send her back. Roswise quickly disappeared from the lower plane and left them alone again. Naruto groaned into his hand before looking up at the turtle. Wait for a few minutes, wait for her to get out of the shower. Let her get dressed, then make sure to actually invite her down here to join us. That poor woman goes through enough crap as it is with the hentegami and we don't need to add to her troubles.
Okay then. Kaneko. Naruto shuffled around with a pink flush on his face. Could you maybe move for a little?
No. It's bad to be sitting down all the time. Maybe you should walk around and get your blood circulate.
You just want me to move because you feel like your blood is circulating. Kaneko's voice was stern and judgmental. If you pop a boner, I'll never forgive you. I don't have much control over that. Learn. For the next few minutes they sat in a stiff, heavy silence as not a single sound was made. Until finally Rosweiss returned. Fully dressed and resting on her knees to face them properly. Her eyes were rimmed red and she looked to be on the verge of tears again at any moment. Hey. He could only give an awkward greeting to the Valkyrie he had met a handful of times before. With a nervous rub of his head he looked aside and tried to continue the conversation as if the last few minutes hadn't happened. So I wanted to greet you. As a Jinchuriki chosen by Isobu. Did you? Rosweiss's eyes were watering as she shivered in fright. Did you see? Kaneko, Kurama, Matabi, and Isobu all looked towards Naruto for his answer. The blonde remained stone-faced before he spoke. Do you want the truth, or a lie? The lie, please. I didn't see anything. My eyes didn't actually see anything and I didn't look at you while you were naked. Why, you're lying, aren't you? Of course I am. Rosweiss whimpered and started shedding tears in her sadness. I'm never going to get married like this. I am really sorry, but, senpai, shut up. You're only making it worse. Kaneko lifted herself up from Naruto's lap and knelt down in front of the panicking Valkyrie. She rested her hand on her shoulder and calmed her down enough for her to look up from her hands. I'm sorry about what happened earlier. Your name is Rosweiss-san, right? The Valkyrie sniffled. Why yes, that's right. My name is Kaneko Taju. And you already know Naruto Uzumaki. She calmly continued. We were told that Isobu-san made a connection with you and gave you energy like Matabi did to me. Rosweiss rubbed her eyes. Why yes. I was completely covered in water for an instant before it suddenly disappeared. Now I can generate as much water as possible from my body. The older woman looked down very meekly. I mean, it is kind of useful when I need to wash my clothes because I can save on money, but there can be so much sometimes that it starts flooding and it leaves water damage. It's kind of an inconvenience. It can be a little daunting having these new abilities and not knowing how to totally control them. Matabi instructed me how to better control it, so maybe you can ask Isobu-san to do the same for you. They looked up at the turtle who just shrugged his head indecisively. Or we can work something out together and make it easier. Really? She perked up a little before her eyes wandered over to Naruto. She blushed and instinctively covered her body. What if I end up naked here again? We told Isobu-san not to invite you down here without your permission now, so that won't happen again. Kaneko then looked back at Naruto and saw his face was still a little flushed before she pouted. But if it'll make you feel better, we don't have to invite horny senpai down with us. What? Haha, Kurama cackled. I guess you aren't invited anymore, Naruto. Fuck off, devil. Oh, look what we have here. Rias and Akeno walked in and found Naruto and Kaneko seated together on the couch. The two seniors walked over and noted that their eyes were closed and they hadn't noticed they had entered the room. Rias snapped her fingers but got no response. They look like they're in some kind of trance. I doubt they're going to wake up with us snapping in front of their faces. Well, that's too bad. With that cheery tone, Rias looked back at her, queen, as she pulled something out of her bag. Akeno, don't. What? The devil, fallen angel hybrid innocuously asked as she subtly hid the permanent marker behind her back. You don't think it would be entertaining to draw on his face and see what happens? Must you always pick fights with each other? Rias rolled her eyes and walked over to her desk. When she came around to her chair, she noticed the laptop closed in front of it. A mischievous smile stretched her cheeks and she slowly opened the computer. Now, why don't we get a look at what he's hiding? Akeno giggled. Are you sure you should be peeking into whatever Azazel-sensei is hiding? I can't imagine anything that man hides is good for our souls. Well, there's a chance he has some plans for the Opie dragon somewhere in here. Rias smiled as she started to type away. Maybe I can get idea of what he had planned for the princess character, and what I need to expect in the future. Akeno tilted her head. What is it? There a document he was working on here. I think this was what he was typing when we had our meetup earlier. Rias opened the document and saw several long pages of story and dialogue written down. She scrolled down and spotted a line that got her attention. "Ah!" The disgraced Duke yelled in pain as the Baroness whipped her riding crop against his abdomen until it was red and bloody. He gasped and tried to catch his breath as the sting of the raw injury ached with every breath. Through gritted teeth he snarled up at woman cackling over him, "Damn you, you bitch." "Oh, such sharp words." The vile seductress heckled as she ran her hands slowly along her riding crop before her hands settled on the tip of it. Her fingers lightly brushed the end and she pulled back to find a slight sheen of blood on her finger. She ran her thumb over it and then her tongue before smiling. I would think someone with such a great education would come up with some words more effective than bitch. Then how about cunt, quim, whore? There is no shortage of terms wasted on you. Ooh, she moaned as she started to lift herself up on the bed and stood over him, her heeled feet on either side of his chest as she towered over him, still so defiant and rowdy. But must you be like that? She licked her lips and tightened her grip on her crop while she shuddered at his glare. There can be pleasure in pain. And I don't have any desire to kill you. Then what the fuck is this about? The former royal yelled, thrashing against the restraints that kept him bound to the bed. What do you have to gain from having me here? You know that decrepit old bastard has disowned me and stripped me of everything. Unless you're just doing this for fun, then there's nothing in this for you. Well, I can't tell a lie and say I'm not moistening at the thought of continuing this. The Baroness softly bit her tongue before slowly bending down to straddle him. But I believe your dear father is just being stubborn. And once he's been convinced that there's something to gain from taking you back, then he'll happily to accept you with open arms. And what could I have to offer him? An heir. The pulled the string of her bonnet, a successor. She removed her clothes and revealed her bountiful breasts that bounced and then settled into place once they were free. Someone to ensure that your family continues on. She removed her skirt to reveal she was not wearing anything, and her moist lips had already started a trail down her inner thigh in anticipation. How does that sound? I think you're insane to torture your capture and then propose we have a child together. I thought we had already agreed on that fact. She grabbed the side of the mangy shorts she had her servants slip over him and tore them off in a single move. When she did, she was met with a massive, throbbing pull that stood straight up and well past her stomach. If she tried to take this thing, that was at least as long as her arm and even thicker, then she might have been split open. The thought made her quiver in anticipation. She lifted herself up, pulled open the lips of her expecting sex, and slowly lowered herself too. Devil, Azazel looked over his folder and tried to work out the schedule for the week. He had to grade the papers from his tests late in the week, and the principal also asked him to help organize the upcoming Kyoto trip. If this schedule got any more hectic, then they'd need to start hiring indentured servants to help ease the workload. When Azazel walked through the door, he was met with the accusatory, furious looks of several students. Rias, Akano, and Naruto were standing ready to meet him with severe glares. Yuto was seated on the other couch watching the show silently. And everyone else was gathered around the laptop as they scrolled down. Issei, Zenovia, and Kaneko were scrolling through it quickly while Asia and Gasper read through their fingers and Irina prayed for forgiveness while her wings shifted from black to white. Oh, he closed his folder and smiled happily. So what did you think? What is wrong is you're writing the script for a porn. It's not a porn. It's the outline for a romance novella. The Governor General corrected with his nose turned upward. A complex, riveting tale of politics and betrayal. Granted, there are a few romance scenes between the ploys for power, but in all actuality they're just quick transitions. Cue quick transitions? Rias balked before pointing at the laptop. The actual plotting takes up at most 2 pages before it goes into a sex scene. An extremely graphic, extremely detailed sex scene. That goes on for more than 15 pages. And I know it's more because you left it unfinished before you had to go to class. Whoa! Blood spurted from Issei's nose. I didn't know the female body could even do that. Zenovia nodded. I didn't know either. I'm learning so much. Asia overheated. I don't think I should be reading this. Then shush Asia senpai. Kaneko's eyes narrowed. I'm trying to memorize some of these techniques. I can't do it. I can't handle this anymore. Gasper dropped into his box and closed the top. I need a cold shower, an ice-cold shower. This is terrible. I shouldn't be reading this as Michael Sama's ace, but I find my eyes lingering. This is betrayal of my station, Irina cried out as her wings continued to change colors. I'm gonna fall. The three seniors turned back to the teacher to give him their stink eyes, but Azazel just grinned proudly. I know I'm in trouble, but you have no idea how happy I am that my rough draft is doing this much already. It's sick and depraved. Romance novels are a staple of literature. I can agree with that, but what you wrote down is just disgusting. You know I take a lot of it from my own experiences, right? You're sick and disgusting. Why are you even doing this? The mixed-haired teacher shrugged. Well, someone came up to me one day and said they imagined me writing fantastic erotic novels for a living. Fuck off, Naruto yelled and pointed at the older man. I mentioned that one time, in passing, after you made a star in the rehearsal for that stupid show. I did not think you would take it to heart and start writing porn. Well, some people have talents they never knew until someone pushes them in the right direction. The fallen angel shrugged. All my years of swimming in tale can now be translated into book form and sold to the pleasure of others. He smiled contently. If that is not fulfilling, then I don't know what is. Wait. Is his thing gonna? Oh, it did. The seniors remained judgmental. You know, Rias, you seem pretty upset considering how much you enjoyed the story. The Gremory heiress looked shocked by his accusation before she shook her head. What are you talking about? You describes everything I wrote down as sick and depraved. Azazel smirked. All 15 pages of it. The young devil responded wordlessly as she tried to form a sentence as Azazel pressed on. Was it the sensual beating, or the part where she presses down on the strapping young man that reeled you in? Rias blushed. I wasn't. She looked desperately between Akano and Naruto before turning to her boyfriend. I wasn't, I swear. I didn't say anything. You look like you don't believe me. I do. And thus Azazel avoids persecution by turning allies against each other. It was like those ritualistic burnings he avoided so skillfully back in the Dark Ages. That brought back some fun memories. And some new inspiration for the next chapter. Devil. Long day. Exhausting. Naruto yawned as he walked through the entrance of the Arashi Heights after spending his time after school checking up on the ramen shop. He was going to have to start making a schedule of clones to send over to keep the shop open while he was at school. Or, better yet, maybe he should hire other people. Kinda stingy to keep all the money to himself when he could be giving someone their first job. Or you could just keep all the profit to yourself. I hear that's a thing rich humans like to do. I have enough money from the ramen world sales. I don't need to be miserly, Naruto said as he skipped up the steps. He noticed while he made his way up that there were a lot more people using rooms and moving through the lobby than there had been before. This place wasn't just an empty gaudy waste of money in the middle of the red light district, but now a profitable waste of money people were actually using. I can't believe this place is actually being used as a hotel. I thought it was just a waste of money Azazel made for his ego. It's still that, but also apparently a legitimate hotel. Naruto rounded a corner away from the hallways and found a smaller elevator free from use. Now that there were actual patrons, the elevators and stairs were filled with people. Thankfully Azazel thought about that possibility and made an elevator that would only be used by a few people but would go up to the higher levels where the devils and other supernatural beings would be staying. The blonde leaned back against the wall as the elevator lifted. Our lives are so weird now, don't you think? Absolutely. You're a born-again devil, living in a hotel, rubbing up against a young lady, staring as a character in an inappropriate children's show, and somehow found a new home for the Biju to find peace in. If we weren't living it right now, I'd call this all lunacy. Gets even crazier when you say all of it like that. Naruto chuckled as he made his way down the hall to his room. Honestly, he could probably do with a quick nap before. Welcome, knave. With a sharp stomp of her stiletto boot, Zenobia stood on top of the bed and looked down at him with an alluring, almost predatory gaze. The blue-haired warrior was almost completely naked except for some racy lingerie and a see-through negligee she had draped over her body. She looked down at Naruto as he remained silent and stunned by what he had walked in on. You made me wait longer than I would have liked. Just for that you deserve some punishment. Oh, and somehow you've gained the attention of several women. Somehow, out of everything, that is the most shocking change. Naruto stayed completely silent and then massaged the bridge of his nose before shaking his head. Zenobia, what are you doing? Is that any way to talk to me? Xenovia scoffed before smirking down at the pawn below her. Continue to address me like that and I'll have no choice but to pin you down and teach you some manners. The two just stared at each other in stagnant silence before Naruto repeated, Xenovia, what are you doing? I'm trying to use some of the tricks and styles from Azazel's book. The knight dropped her dominatrix mindset and spoke normally while she jumped off the bed. It seemed very effective and left a strong impression on everyone when they were reading it in the book. I wanted to test my hand at it. And where did you get those clothes exactly? There was this large assortment of clothes and attire down in a massive closet Azazel told me about. It must have been the same closet Azazel had picked out his clothes for his date. There were normal clothes, party attire, fancy suits and dresses, costumes, mascot outfits, swimwear, lingerie, underwear, and pretty much everything you can imagine. The blue-haired girl slipped a finger under the flimsy, thin material that delicately covered her body and lifted it up slightly from where it clung to her skin. This was hung under Saucy Night Soiree. So I gave it a try, but it's my first time wearing anything like this. Feels like I'm basically naked. She looked up at Naruto for his opinion. What do you think? I'm not sure if it suits you. The lingerie will keep you cold and the long-heeled leather boots are probably really uncomfortable. If you aren't used to wearing stuff like this, you shouldn't push yourself. You aren't even looking at what I'm wearing. Trust me, I got a good enough look before. Blood flows down and down and down and down and then rises all the way to the top again. Truly a marvel of nature. Naruto tried to ignore the voice in his head before turning to the door, his eyes looking towards the ceiling as he did everything he could not to look down at the alluring clothes Xenovia wore and the tantalizing skin it teased. Come on, let's get you back in your normal clothes and… Senpai, Naruto paused and looked down at the sing-song voice calling for him, standing just in front of him with a meek, timid smile on her face. Her ears playfully twitching on her head as a healthy red hue brightened her pale cheeks. She was dressed in a short yukata that stopped just up her thighs, and by the looks of how it was going down her shoulder she wasn't wearing any underwear. Naruto's eyes nearly bugged out of his head before he caught himself. Hey Kaneko, what the hell? I wanted to wear something I thought would draw the eye. The freshman nervously crossed her hands behind her back and rolled her toes in the carpet. I got the idea from Azazel Sensei's book. But I thought the dominatrix thing Xenovia is doing was the thing from the book. That's actually from chapter 3. Kaneko innocently informed in her barely together covering. There was a whole prologue where the Duke has relations with his demi-human maid-servant for 32.5 pages. Her tail swayed softly behind her in furor. I liked that part the best. I liked it too. Xenovia nodded as her chest jiggled. There were some parts that I was really looking forward to testing out. No way. Naruto put his foot down. I am not letting you do anything that madman put in a book. We're not expecting you to. Xenovia reassured before shaking her head. Honestly, if your penis was as big as the main character's, then I would be profoundly worried for your health. The blood needed to sustain an erection like that would leave the rest of your body dangerously deprived.
Xenovia, my dick is not as big as what that guy had in that book.
Oh, I know. I had it in my hand. Remember? Naruto groaned in unbridled anger as the former church warrior continued. And while I know it's not abnormally huge like that book, it certainly felt like a big enough size. Is that pride I'm detecting? And no, he quickly blurted out and tried to shield his crotch again. After a moment he looked down and noticed Kaneko was staring down at his crotch. Don't look at, hey. Come here. Xenovia's arms snaked around his chest and pulled him along before dropping him on top of the bed. Once he laid on top of the sheets, the blue-haired seductress started to crawl up on top of him and pinned him down with a knee on either side of his chest. Now we can't do what we learned in that book, but we can at least try something, right? Hey, come on senpai, please. Kaneko crawled on the other side and nuzzled into his arm, clutching it tightly to her budding chest and softly nestling her ears into his neck as she took in his scent. It isn't fair to hear so much about yours and Buckow's exploits and never get anything for ourselves. She's right. Xenovia nodded as she laid down and rested her head against his chest. She marveled at the fact his body was so much wider and warmer than she had expected. Feeling like she could slip into sleep at a moment's notice, we wouldn't dare take away what you and Rias Bucko are forming, but we would still like to have something too. You share a bed together while we have to sleep alone, and that just isn't fair. I wasn't expecting that. It wouldn't have to be much. Kaneko lifted her head and softly blew warm breath over his ear and reveled in the way he shuddered. But a hug close to the chest. Maybe a nap or a full night's sleep. Or a kiss. That would be nice. Xenovia lifted herself up while still sitting on top of Naruto. She grabbed the ends of her negligee and lifted it over her head, pulling off the only piece of clothing she had other than her stringed panties and her heeled boots. Her large breasts were free in the air until they were tightly pressed against his chest as she leaned back into him, and we can see how things go from there. Xenovia. Kaneko. Well, Xenovia whispered in a husky voice before she closed her eyes and leaned in. What do you say? Xenovia-senpai. The knight opened her eyes and quickly realized the blonde man she had pinned down had slipped away. Now she was straddling Kaneko and pressing her body up to hers against the bed. The two girls blinked and stared at each other before Xenovia clicked her tongue. We may have pushed too far too quickly, huh? I think Senpai's energy said he was getting excited, but the Nekomata looked disappointed as she looked down at the bed. Maybe he just doesn't want us like that. Hey, don't give up yet. Xenovia smiled. We don't give up that easily. It took effort for him and Rias Bucko to reach this point, and we'll get there too. Kaneko showed a faint smile and nodded. Okay. She then looked down and her eyes widened as she realized Xenovia's glorious bust was pressed up against hers. She nearly sustained mental damage seeing the sheer difference between those giant fleshy melons being hard-pressed against her flat surface as she pouted. Maybe we should get up now, huh? She waited before she realized Xenovia's weight had settled down on her. Senpai? Shush. The knight whispered as she yawned. You're soft and warm like a pillow, Kaneko. It's so nice. Damn her warm furry ears and their comfy allure. Devil. You okay? I'm fine. Naruto grumbled as he slowly walked through the hallway. Just need some air. Seems more like you need an evened out blood flow. Kurama. Stop talking about how stiff I am. You're struggling down a hallway bow-legged. I feel compelled to point it out for your benefit. Well, he certainly didn't need to be reminded constantly that he had a serious reaction to the stimulation he had just felt.
He thought it was bad enough when Xenovia and Kaneko had caught him in outfits that would have tempted even the purest of saints. But then they crawled over him, and he realized just how soft and warm and good they smelled. Seriously, he had only ever had Rias that close to him for an extended period of time, so how was it that girls all felt warm and soft in different but still amazing ways?
And he had only made his problem worse. Naruto? Is something the matter? The blonde looked over as he passed a small kitchenette along the hallway that Rias and Akeno were sipping tea together in. He carefully walked over without straining himself and groaned. I'm fine technically. Just feeling the effects of Kaneko and Xenovia ambushing me. Era, they ambushed you? Akeno said. Why would they do that? Well, The blonde groaned as he sat down and joined them at the small table. The two devils looked at him oddly before Rias looked down and realized what was causing his discomfort and shock. They kinda took a liking to Azazel's writing and tried to imitate some of what they saw. Rias' cheeks slowly puffed out in a pronounced pout at the implication as Akeno nearly choked on her tea and then hid her giggle behind her hand. As the king silently fumed and the queen nearly choked on the drink in her throat, the pawn groaned. We need to make sure that Azazel's book never sees the light of day. Akeno finally composed herself and tried to hide her smile as she spoke. And what exactly is it those two did that got this kind of reaction? Just stuff. Naruto. Rias darkly muttered, what happened?
Just hugs and them cuddling up with me. Nothing else happened, I swear. He quickly defended himself. They said something about how they wanted attention as well and they should get something after me and Rias. I don't totally know what they meant, but I was. Naruto paused as he saw Rias and Akeno share a knowing glance between each other. What is it?
Akeno shrugged. Well, Naruto-san, this is just what happens when you ignore people for too long. What does that mean? I don't appreciate them cornering you like that while I'm away. Rias huffed before letting out a deep breath, but I suppose I can understand their impatience. This was bound to happen when they feel ignored for so long. What do you mean ignored? Oh, talking about harems and multiple partners. I remember my first questioning when I was younger. I fretted and considered the ramifications for all of 10 seconds before I just dove in and went as deep as I could. Okay, No more talking or else we're gonna have images of the grossest. Naruto, Rias, and Akano all paused and looked over when they realized it wasn't their resident overindulging ancient pervert joining their conversation. Instead it was a familiar old man with a long beard and eye patch grabbing a beer from the fridge. Talking about sexual conquests might just be the best conversation I've had in the last few days. Hentaigami? Odin-sama. Rias quickly stood out of her seat and addressed the chief god of the north. What are you doing here? In your theology, I guess the term would be seeking sanctuary? The god shrugged and slipped on his beer as he paced around the room. See, shit ain't been going so well back home and I need serious help. Help, sir? That's right. Odin chuckled. I have assassins after me. And I might just die if I ain't careful. Lucky for me I have a team of great bodyguards that have my back. Odin-sama. Where are you? Granted their job would be easier if I didn't slink away for a brew every chance I get. Odin gave a hearty laugh as the younger devils could only look at him oddly for his strange behavior. The old god gave a sharp whistle. I'm in here. Odin-sama. Rossweiss rounded the corner and ran into the kitchenette as she collapsed in relief when she saw her charge safe. Don't run away like that. Azazel followed behind her. Seriously, old man, you're being targeted. The least you can do is have some concern for yourself. Do you know how many attempts on my life I've had in my lifetime? Can't be bothered with one this late in the game. Odin-sama, please don't take this so lightly. A gruff, deep voice joined them as a massive bulky man walked to the door of the cramped room. His eyes were squinted and he had spiky black hair that rounded into a beard around his chin. His stern, concerned expression towards the god persisted as he spoke. If you were to lose your life, then the effects would be. The crash of a chair clattering against the ground took the attention of everyone in the room. The tall man looked over and looked shocked when he saw who it was. Naruto and Rias looked over and saw Akano had stumbled back into her chair with wide, almost overwhelmed eyes directed towards the man. Hey! Akano! Oto-sama! The two fallen angels looked between each other in silence as not a sound was made by anyone else. Welp, that doesn't bode well for me. Until Odin broke the tension with a sigh and sip of his booze. Devil, devil. Oh god baby. Yes, yees SSSS. You like that bitch? Oh I love it. Want me to fuck you harder? I want you to fuck me until I can't feel my legs. It was just another normal night for Issei Hyodo. Matsuda and Motohama had informed him of a raunchy, delightful new porno on the internet that was worth his attention. Issei had typed the URL in, found the video, and could safely say they were not wrong. Beautiful woman. Alluring voice. Very little of the man in the shot. And her huge, probably fake breasts were bouncing up into her face with every thrust and rail into her body. It was great and Issei would have already strangled the rooster if the circumstances permitted it. However, earlier in the Orc Club he and the other students found Azazel's rough draft of a sex novel he was writing. Issei's eyes immediately skimmed over everything that had been put to page and desperately searched for the acts of sex and pleasure. Fortunately Azazel was something of a sex fiend and had written quite a large portion of scenes like that to wet the whistle. It was quite a sight to see. Unfortunately he wasn't the only one to see it, and now. I'm gonna cum you slut. That's right daddy, come in me. Pump me till I spew. Issei-san, why does that woman call that man daddy? They aren't actually related like that, are they? No, otherwise this would be under a very different tab and I'd probably throw up. So why does she call him that? They appeared to be the same age. Asia leaned in and closely inspected the screen while the woman received a foot-long present into her core. She might even be a little older if I'm guessing. Well, it's just a thing for some guys, Asia. Issei gently squeezed her arm and pulled her away from the screen. He knew she was already watching it, but somehow her being even closer to the depraved horror they were watching seemed worse for him. He noticed that her cheeks were bright red from embarrassment at watching the explicit scene in front of them. Even though she was watching this porn with him, she was still innocent and pure. It was the small blessings he was thankful for. Issei coughed into his hand and avoided Asia's eyes. Some guys like it when girls call them things intimately. Some like being insulted to, stir them on. And some like being coddled. Some guys get turned on being called Oni-chan or something, and some like being called daddy. What are your preferences, Issei-san? A beautiful, blonde bombshell was asking him his sexual preference in a cute voice while they watched porn. This should have been a highlight of his life, and yet the awkwardness was just painful. I'm not sure, and even if I was, I don't think I should say. Should I call you Daddy when we're alone? Would you like that? Wow, that had to be the fastest he's ever gotten an erection in his life. And unfortunately it was followed with an unprecedented amount of shame at letting her say that. When Asia had knocked on his door and said she wanted to learn more about the stuff she had seen in Azazel's book, Issei nearly cried with joy. But now he was here, sitting beside Asia as they watched porn, and he couldn't help but feel like he was corrupting the sweet nun to the dark side. Well, at least he was doing his devil duty and coercing others to sin. Yes, that's a very healthy way of looking at this situation. Here it comes. Take it, bitch. I'm CUMMMMMINNNNNNNNGGGGGG. Asia gasped and covered her mouth as the woman screamed at the top of her lungs. She gulped and looked over at Issei. Are the names he calls her having the same effect for her? No, I think those are just for him as well. The name calling during sex is a very biased, one-sided system. Guys get called something tough and strong while the ladies are demeaned and insulted. Just the kind of industry the porn world is. UGGGRH. Issei's eyes widened and Asia looked mortified as the man pulled out his massive appendage and started rubbing it fiercely. Several more streams of cum shot out over the woman as she moaned before her hair was roughly grabbed and yanked up so his cock could go in her mouth to finish. That was actually pretty hot. He was sure he would have finished right there if he was alone and Asia wasn't watching so intently by his side. Issei-san, Asia whispered meekly as she watched through her fingers as the porn star swallowed the man's large rod so easily. Is that normal? The guy's size, the volume, or how easily she's handling it? Why yes. She nodded and failed to specify which she wanted. Issei sighed. Well, no, most guys aren't that big. I think it's pretty rare for a guy to have equipment that big. I don't think all of that stuff is real, and if it is then he seriously needs to rehydrate. And I'm pretty sure she has experience, so this might just be another Tuesday afternoon for her. Wow. The blonde bishop took a deep steady breath to calm herself down after the porno had finished. She placed a hand on her chest and felt her heart hammer rapidly inside from the excitement. Oh, okay. You alright? Why, yes, I think so. She nodded before looking up at Issei softly. Thank you for showing me this. I think I finally have an idea of what sexual intercourse is really like now. Well, Asia, this isn't really the best example of what real sex is like, Issei said, wanting to quell and correct any misunderstandings the nun might have from watching the video. I mean, people's stamina is different. What they like and don't like. How comfortable they are. If his and Asia's eyes met and they stared longingly at each other, if they love each other. Issei-san, oh God, I love when you slam me with that thick, fat cock. They looked down as the woman turned around and presented her ass to her lover. So get in here, big boy. Fuck baby, you get me so horny. Oh ye h. And refractory periods. Issei quickly added on as Asia watched entranced as they began their second round with hardcore anal sex. You can't ever forget about the non-existent refractory periods in pornos. Maybe we should. Asia slapped his hand away before he could exit the window and put a stop to the madness. Her face was red and her eyes were slightly watering, but Asia was determined to watch the video until the end. So now Issei was sitting there, silently, watching porn beside his innocent young friend while he pitched a tent. His phone rang. Oh good, some way to get out of this. Issei quickly reached over and grabbed his phone to break the terrible tension that had started building. He looked on the screen and saw a notice from Naruto. It looked pretty urgent from the way he had typed it, although that might just be because he did it too quickly. Get I over too hot RL mo gucking impoert net. Looks like he still needs to practice texting. Issei pocketed his phone and stood up with a groan. He readjusted himself before looking over. Asia, we've gotta go. The bishop didn't responded as she reached a particularly raunchy part of the video. Asia. Huh? Come on. Naruto senpai texted and we have to go to the hotel. It looks like something is going on and we need to be there. Oh okay. Asia shut the laptop and jumped off the bed. She fixed her hair and clothes as Issei ran down the stairs. Issei. The young devil looked over and saw his father and mother watching the TV on the couch. Are you going somewhere? We were going to get something to eat. Sorry guys, we got a message from one of our upperclassmen and they need us to drop by. Issei fixed his school jacket over himself. I don't know when we'll get back. Okay sweetheart, just make sure to stay safe. We will. Issei stepped aside as Asia came down the stairs beside him. Ready to go? Yes. Asia nodded, glowing and brighter than ever as she smiled. I feel so awake and full of energy. Watching that pornography with you really was a fulfilling experience, Issei-san. She ran ahead to the door before giggling and looking back at the object of her affections. We don't want to keep them waiting, Daddy. His father looked at him in disgust and disappointment as his mother slowly reached for the phone. Don't call the police on your own. Fuck it, I'm leaving. Devil, Issei-senpai. Issei waved to Gasper as he and Asia met with the young freshmen, Yuto, and Irina on their way to Arashi Heights. The young Dampier walked over to his upperclassman. Did you get the message as well? Bucko contacted me by hologram. Yuto answered. She said it was urgent and I needed to get here quickly. Gasper nodded. I got a message from Kaneko-chan. She said I had to come quickly or else I'd be in trouble. Xenovia called me. Irina held out her phone. It sounded like trouble. And we were the only ones summoned with chicken scratch. Issei grumbled as they spotted the ostentatious building and made their way up the stairs. If we were all called so late then it has to be something important, right? It might have something to do with the Chaos Brigade? Irina theorized. They attacked you the other day, right Issei-kun? Yeah, but do you think they would make another move so quickly? I don't think so. Yuto answered Issei as he narrowed his eyes in thought. That seems like the actions of a desperate tactic that they wouldn't use so quickly after the original attack. I think this is something else entirely. What could it be? Gasper fretted as Asia rested her hands on his shoulders to ease his worry. I hope it isn't something scary. Well, whatever it is, Issei reached for the doors and pushed them open. Let's see what we're up against. If that stupid crow is going to make me pay for my room then I'll want the full package. The old man in the eye patch announced as he walked up to the front desk and pulled out his card. I'll take the top floors of this crappy place and every room on them. As well as every drop of the most expensive alcohol you've got. If you see the cost for any bottle and it leaves you reeling, I want it in my mouth right away. Sir, I'm sorry. The lady behind the desk slightly panicked at turning down the chief god's request. But the top levels of the hotel aren't actually for public use. They're just for the owners and proprietors of the hotel. Hey, if it's a matter of money then don't bother trying to sell me. Odin tapped his card impatiently. I got enough on here to buy this hotel and the surrounding block a few dozen times over and make a metropolis. And no sir, it's not that. Do you want real money and not a piece of plastic? Odin reached into his robe and pulled out a massive wad of cash. What about this? This more up your alley?
Oh wow, sir I don't think. Here you can have that. Odin casually handed the huge wad of money over to the clerk as if he was just handing over a stray wrapper he needed thrown away. The young lady's eyes nearly bulged out of her head at the money she held as Odin reached into his pocket and pulled out another wad. What do you say people? Think I have enough to pay for a room?
Yeah, that's what I like to hear, Odin cackled and started tossing wads up in the air until it was raining money. People in the lobby immediately started catching the bills or scrounging for them on the ground as the chief god laughed. Now, there's more where that came from. The arriving orc students watched the display of extravagant wealth and chauvinistic indulgence in silence. Asia whispered as she watched the chaos. I think that might have something to do with it. Probably. Gasper pulled on Issei's sleeve and pointed down.
Everyone looked at the floor in time to see Rosweiss crawling on the tiles and snatching up as many bills as she could.
She greedily swiped them away before anyone could approach until she arrived at their feet. The Valkyrie looked up and when she recognized the faces of Rias Gremory's peerage she went hysterical. This isn't what it looks like. I am not scrounging for Odin-sama's money as he continues to throw around his wealth without fear or concern. As someone who very regularly tries to get the most out of every cent, I know the value of a bill. And I know that this is bad. So I'm just collecting all the bills to give to Odin-sama later after. 1 second went by as Rosweiss just stared up at the students in silence. Slowly her eyes watered as she sniffled. It's not fair, okay? It's just not fair. We get it. I mean, this is weird and we have nothing to compare it to, but we totally understand what you're going through. Let it fly, ha 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 ha. Suck on that, you murder of asses. Devil, what did you expect from me? Odin mumbled with a frown on his face. I come to this crummy little shack looking for assistance since that snotty little crow was so adamant on connecting more frequently and working together. And when I come to him for help, he tells me I need to pay for a room. Put a little life into this crappy place. What the fuck? The old god exclaimed. Does he not remember who I am? I'm Odin. I'm a pretty big fucking deal. Do I need to bring unending suffering and hellfire upon this place so that he doesn't forget who I am? Because I am the vindictive type. And no, Odin-sama. Rosweiss nervously waved her arms and tried to quell the god's fury. I am sure Azazel-sama is very familiar with your wrath and punishments. So I doubt we need to bring them down upon this small Japanese town. Why yeah, Odin-sama. Issei agreed as the others nodded in order to avoid an incident. I think we would all really appreciate you not bringing down a horde of locusts or anything. Locusts? Peefed, that was your lord's tastes. I prefer eternal winters that destroy crops, freezing rivers and lakes, and leave unprepared folks frozen to death in their homes. Ha ha ha, man, I was a little shit when I was younger. The devils and angel looked at Rosweiss for an answer only for her to shake her head and sigh. The Valkyrie mumbled. Well, you gripe, Odin-sama. But you were the one who was jumping at the chance to leave as quickly as possible. Don't use facts against me, Rosweiss. Those always come to bite me in the ass and I won't tolerate it. The old man groused and his loyal attendant nodded. Man, I hope things have settled by now. What do you want settled? Odin-sama. The old god sighed and pulled the handle to the door back. Knowing our luck today, this. I am sorry, alright? If I knew we were coming your way I would have called and warned you. I didn't need a warning, I just need you not to be here. I had no choice. It was Odin-sama's command that we come to see Azazel, and you were here too. Why are you even working with Odin-sama in the first place? How did you end up as a bodyguard to a northern god? I offered my services for the benefit of our alliance. Helping a god of such standing like Odin-sama would do great work towards showing that we can work together. And if something were to happen to someone like Odin-sama, it would throw off the balance of power not just to our faction but for the entire world. And someone so important is being watched over by you? Maybe he'd have more luck with someone who has a better record of watching out for others. Hey, don't talk to me like that, young lady. No, you don't have the right to talk to me like that. Daughter and father stood across from each other after their intense argument and caught their breath. The large, bearded fallen angel took several moments to collect his composure. He rubbed his eyes and sighed before looking up with guilt. I'm sorry. I got carried away. Akeno flinched and continued to glare at Barakiel. Unlike normally the calm, composed, and teasing senior girl was disheveled, frantic, and looking more animated and emotional than she would usually be. Her shields and barriers had cracked in the presence of her father, and the uncertain girl behind them started to peek through. The ponytailed queen tried to catch her breath, her chest heaving and her cheeks slightly flushed from yelling before she looked around the room. Naruto and Rias were watching from the side, with Azazel witnessing the scene with a disappointed glint in his eyes and Zenobia and Kaneko looking worried by what they had seen. On the other side, Odin and Rosweiss had returned, with Issei, Asia, Irina, and Gasper looking shocked by what happened while Yuto watched with sympathetic eyes. With a shaky breath, Akeno shook her head and walked away before she started another argument. I'm taking a room. Barakiel looked like he wanted to reach out and stop her before it was too late, but his hand froze and then slowly lowered back as he realized he wasn't going to pacify his daughter's intense anger by pestering her. It was Gasper of all people that broke the silence that stagnated the room. Is Akeno-senpai going to be? Give her some time. Rias stepped forward and didn't so much advise as order both her followers and the guests around her. She just wants to catch her breath and cool down. We can give her that. Naruto looked at Rias back as she resolutely and firmly made her point clear. However, he noticed her eyes shift towards where Akeno walked away before settling forward again. He nodded and stepped forward. So before that all happened, I think we were trying to do some introductions. That's right. Azazel stepped forward, easing the tension and awkwardness with his natural gift of grabbing people's attention. So for those of you who didn't get to hear me finish and to those who just arrived, let me introduce you to my friend. The Governor-General stepped up and patted his larger friend's back in an effort to cheer him up. "This is Barakiel, my comrade and a cadre in the Grigori hierarchy of the fallen angels. He and I have been comrades and best friends for centuries." Azazel patted the large man's back. "I'd trust him with my life 1,000,000,000 times over, and I'm sure he would do the same. Ain't that right, Barakiel?" The large man remained silent and continued to stare in the direction Akano had taken. Azazel just looked up at him patiently before looking around at all the looks they were getting. He coughed into his hand and nudged Barakiel's back. "Come on buddy, time to say something." Barakiel gave a heavy sigh before turning around and glaring down at his comrade and Governor-General. "Where the fuck have you been this whole time?" Azazel sweated. Beg pardon? Shemazai has seen neither head nor feather of you in ages. You're our Governor-General, but you have barely come back to the Grigori headquarters in months." Barakiel turned to Azazel, and even though he held a higher position as the leader of the fallen angels, he cowered under the towering presence his comrade exuded. "So what have you been doing?" Azazel gulped and looked everywhere but at his friend. "What are you talking about? I've been here trying to establish a base of operations for our alliance, as well as fighting off the encroaching forces of the Chaos Brigade and molding these young minds. And I have been keeping in contact with Shemazai and the Grigori. What do you think I've been?" He's been blatantly talking about his sex life to minors. He's been harassing and trying to advise us how to have sex. He teases his students and mocks them for their failures. He always makes inappropriate jokes, innuendos, and esoteric cultural references that go over some of our heads. He put a vibrator in his prosthetic mechanical arm. He broke Naruto Senpai's mentality by mentioning he didn't have a large variety of different attacks. He dropped me into Tannen Osan's deadly training without any warning. He built this hotel and invested in a ramen business because he was bored. He made a children's show based around loving and poking breasts. And he's also writing porn. Azazel stared ahead with blank, dead eyes as a judgmental Barakiel, an interested Odin, and a blushing Roswise looked at him. The mixed-haired man lowered his head, chewed on his lip, and then chuckled lowly to himself. He shook his head and looked back at his students. "Hey, you little fuckers have been waiting for this moment, haven't you? Damn straight we have. You are some vindictive, monstrous little kids." Azazel smiled and wiped the tears from his eyes. "I'm so proud. We are going to have a long conversation about what you're doing and how you are influencing these children when we have the time. And I'd like to see this porn that was mentioned earlier, just a curiosity." "Odin-sama, I'll let you read it afterwards. You don't think you can tempt me with amateur pornography? Then why is there a line of goo seeping down your thigh?" Roswise panicked and immediately covered her legs and thighs only to realize there was nothing actually there. Odin cackled and stepped forward. "Okay, time to talk about the most important guy in the room, me." Naruto sighed. "Fuck, I forgot we had to deal with you." That's a sentiment shared by countless god, monsters, and mythical beings for eons. "Kid, I ain't going anywhere. Yeah, this is gonna be great, devil. So here's the long and short of it. My life is being threatened and if I get killed then shit's gonna go sideways." The god griped and ran a hand through his long stringy beard. He opened his eye when Asia approached the table in front of him and placed his tea down. "I might be old but I don't feel like dying just yet. So, I need help. Which is why I've been shadowing him along with Roswise-san." Barakiel added as he looked between the couches and chairs brought around in a circle for them to discuss the matter at hand. "No harm can come to Odin-sama, or the balance of power in our world would be threatened. We've been guarding Odin-sama for some time now, and we've thwarted some attempts on his life." Roswise placed her cup down and sat up in proper form, showing a more professional and capable side of her than most in the room had witnessed before. There have been attempts that range from amateur to more collected and thought through. The attempts on Odin-sama are more severe, right? Issei proposed. Then the Chaos Brigade might be trying to make a move. We recently had a run-in with the hero faction. If it was a bunch of kids playing pretend I could handle that myself. Odin interrupted in a grouchy tirade before shaking his head. "No, we aren't dealing with the Chaos Brigade. This time it's a little something closer to home." Azazel raised his brow, meaning, Loki. That name caused several responses across the room. Gasps of shock and groans of recognition as Azazel cursed into his palms and Gasper cowered in fright. "Naruto, being the person with the least amount of knowledge about this world and its legends, still faintly recognized the name, Loki? Wasn't that the name of the guy from those movies?
Those were all characters and interpretations, but this one is the original. Loki, Norse god of mischief, chaos, and trickery. Someone who has had grievances and battles with multiple figures from Norse mythology. Rias answered as she rubbed her forehead in agitation. He was always one of the more recognizable and well-known deities, but due to a surge in popularity in recent years he's become one of the most popular gods on Earth.
And with that surge in popularity comes a rise in power, a sense of entitlement, and an urge to see his dreams fulfilled. With a bit of venom and spite in his voice, Odin glared ahead blankly as he clicked his tongue. That little upstart shit has gotten a little too big for his britches and decided he's going to go after my life. And how do you know that? Because the fucker is always trying to mess with us. The Aesir, the Vanir, the Giants. All of them. He lives to create and spread chaos wherever he goes. Issei raised his hand. Isn't he your son? No, that was a lie spread from movies and comics. He is not my son. We're barely even related. He's just a messed up little fucking offshoot that wants to destroy everything. Okay, sorry, don't bite my head off. Well, why? Naruto inquired of the god. Why does he want to kill you?
Weren't you listening, kid? If I die, things will take a turn for the fucked. Odin gripped his staff tightly as he stared ahead farther than any of them could see. Loki's life and desires revolve around causing the greatest amount of chaos possible, and with me being the symbol of leadership and control for my pantheon, he's my nemesis. As long as he gets around to killing me, for no reason whatsoever, he'll be satisfied with what he's done.
Odin-sama, Roswise lowly mumbled as she pouted and stared at her leader accusingly. You know it isn't as one-sided as that. Odin rolled his one eye exhaustively before shaking his head. Fine. I guess there's blame on both sides. He tried to kill me. I bring a storm down on his head. He destroys the lives of some people I'm interested in. I send his daughter to hell. Odin started to chuckle under his breath as he shook his head. There was this one time when I. So there's this horse we had to deal with. Odin doubled over and smacked his knee. Oh fuck me, it was so funny. The students who didn't understand what the old man was saying looked between each other. Finally they looked towards Azazel for some clarification. The fallen angel sighed and shrugged. Google, Norse Loki horse, and you'll see what's happening. Phones were immediately pulled out and those keywords entered. They waited for the pages to load. Oh fuck, gross, HENTAIGAMI, what the fuck? What? It wasn't deliberate. He attempted to defend himself as the room quickly turned on him. Oh what, suddenly I'm the bad guy? You little shits were on my side a second ago. Typical of this generation to take one little thing that happened years ago and use it to vilify me. I mean, I kinda understand why he feels like killing you.
Fine. Okay. You win. I'm not the great big super good god we all painted me to be.
There are few real heroes or villains. The world is filled with shades of gray. Great discussion on the banal senses of morality we haven't all had shoved down our throats over the years. But here's something. If I do something bad, he gets raped by a horse. If he does something bad, it's the end of the world. Fimbulwinter, dying lands. Ragnarok. End of the world. So before you go lighting a candle effigy for the guy, remember what he aims to do. Azazel hissed but nodded. That is true. Loki lives to destroy and disrupt, and if he gets his way then things will take a turn for the worse. We gotta take care of the geezer and make sure no harm comes to him. We were always going to do that, Rias assured, just shocked to see what the past had in store for us. Do we not all have darkness in our past? We'll need to start planning how we'll guard and protect this old skeleton while Loki is gunning for him. Azazel stood up with Odin as they walked out to another room. We'll try to iron out some of the details, so you kids just try to prepare for anything. This might be more of a challenge than we were expecting at this level. And with Azazel's warning he left the room so they could discuss their next objective. Devil, fuck. Oh my. Are you kidding? Naruto kept giving slight, unfinished exclamations as he read his screen and was shocked by what he saw. These aren't all real stories, right? The gods of this world didn't actually do all these things, did they? No, Yuto shook his head. Many of the stories of these mythologies have been translated and interpreted in ways that have muddied the original stories. Some of these stories are exaggerations of the gods and their actions. The Gremory knight then looked down at his own phone and grimaced. That being said, not everything is made up either. But that horse thing was pretty fucked up, right? Kaneko nodded from her spot in his lap. Yeah. That's seriously fucked up. I can't imagine what it must have felt like getting something like that from a horse. The young freshman then paused and looked over her shoulder at her whiskered senior. He noticed her gaze as she whispered, "You don't have something that." "No, and if you ask that again, I'm throwing you off." Issei looked at Naruto and Kaneko oddly as they eyed each other challengingly before he coughed and looked to the large fallen angel they had been left with. You're Barakiel-san, right? Akeno-san's father and Azazel-sensei's comrade, correct?" The pawn respectfully held out his hand. "I'm Issei Hyodo and I'm Akeno-san's kohai. We owe a lot to Akeno-san and her guidance."
"I know who you are, Hyodo-kun." Barakiel took his hand and shook it while still looking at the young man suspiciously. "I've heard about the Opie Dragon show Azazel has been producing and your part in it. Is it true you awakened your connection as the Red Dragon Emperor by devouring breasts and adding a little salt on top for the flavor? Where did that rumor come from?" Issei exclaimed and furiously shook his head. "No, I don't eat breasts. That would mean hurting and leaving a boob deformed, which I would never do. And where does the salt for flavoring thing even come from? I mean I've always wanted to lick and kiss breasts before, so the adding of some seasoning on them." A small drop of blood came down Issei's nose before he wiped it away. "It's baseless slander."
"I need you to answer me honestly." Barakiel's tone was clear and focused as he glared down at the young man. "You weren't planning to eat Akino's breasts for a power-up, were you?" "I don't even eat breasts in the first place. And it wasn't eating breasts that gave me power. It was remembering that Asia's breasts were still growing." The embarrassed nun squeaked from the kitchenette and covered her chest defensively as Issei continued. "The reminder that those beautiful mounds could continue to grow and get bigger was something that gave me a religious experience.
And then remembering that other wonderful breasts can grow too made it better. And no, I didn't eat Akeno-san's breasts, but the thought that her massive, glorious sweater puppies could actually become even better, and that I still want to see them, and maybe add some whipped cream for flavor."
"Enough!" Barakiel roared and ended Issei's unstoppable tirade as the fallen angel stood up while lighting jumped off his body. "I will not allow these insults against my daughter." "I didn't mean any kind of insult," Issei said while wiping his mouth and bloody nose. "I meant everything I said in only the most respectable way." Issei-kun, you're only throwing oil on the fire," Irina called over, fretting at the sight of the lightning arcing off Barakiel's body. "What does oil do to lightning?" Xenovia asked. "I imagine it only makes things worse than fire." "Xenovia, not now, Barakiel-san, please don't." "Enough." Rias grabbed Issei's shoulder and pushed him back down into his spot on the couch. As the crimson-haired beauty stepped around and faced the fallen angel, he reeled back his lighting until it disappeared. "Barakiel-san, I'm glad to see you again. I understand your unease at the situation, but please don't threaten my servants like that." "I apologize, Gremory-san." Barakiel quickly changed his demeanor and respectfully nodded to the younger lady. Unlike his wariness with Issei and his anxiety with Akeno, he showed nothing but respect to the Gremory heiress. "To be honest, I'm surprised that you are willing to speak with me so frankly. I was sure with Akeno. With my daughter's opinions of me you wouldn't want to speak at all. I understand Akino's feelings and frustrations towards you, but I also know that she wouldn't be here right now without you." What Rias left in the air was both the positive and negative of what that entailed. This was Rias acting as a diplomat, a leader, and Akino's dearest friend. "I'm not sure how successful your attempts to speak with her will be while you are staying here, but please make sure to be mindful of her emotions when you approach her." "Yes. I will do my best." The heavy air over the room slowly subsided as the large fallen angel and the shorter devil lady walked away. Rosweiss coughed into her hand and fixed her position in her seat to look up at Rias. Gremory-san, I think we need to start considering what we need to do for Odin-sama's protection. Do we have a plan or have we given it any thought?" "Well, Odin-sama will need protection, and it would be useful to have at least 2 or more people watching him at any time. Barakiel-san and Rosweiss-san, since that's your job, can we leave daytime guard duty to you?" The large fallen angel gave a low hum in agreement as the Valkyrie nodded her head. All right. I don't want to leave it just to you two during the day when we're off at school and his protection is at its lowest. Fortunately we have someone to counteract that. Rias turned, crossing her arms under her chest and eyeing her boyfriend who deflated once he had her attention. Naruto can create a clone to join you, and if anything were to happen to that clone the full account of what it had been doing up to that point would return to him, giving us the warning to come and join you. You're making me spend all my time with that geezer? It would be a clone having to do the work, but when it disappeared he'd be left with a full day's worth of things they had done. And he had a sinking suspicion it would leave him traumatized. Did I do something wrong? No, that's just what you get for being useful. Rias teased affectionately while giggling at his frowning face. She ran her thumb over his whiskers and smiled. Will you please do it for me? Of course he was going to do it. What was he going to do? Say no? I think this is the part where I make the whip cracking sound, right? The blonde grumbled angrily under his breath as Rias turned to the rest of her peerage. After school we will come here, as our base of operations while we are guarding Odin-sama, and relieve guard duty from Barakiel-san and Roswise-san. We will take it in turns, with well-rounded groups of 3 guarding Odin-sama through the night until morning. Sounds like a few of us aren't going to be getting much sleep. Yuto smiled before looking up at his king. I'll offer my services for guarding the first night. Thank you, Yuto. Appreciating how studious her first night was as ever, she looked around again. We'll be pairing up to try and make groups that cover all our bases for protection. So be prepared for long nights when it's your turn. Understood. Good. Rias nodded. Now let's get a record of our battle power. Issei should be able to cover for most of his group with the power of the Red Dragon Emperor. Xenovia and Yuto each have a powerful blade at their side. Plus we got our secret weapons now on our side, right? Naruto said with a knowing grin as he looked down at Kaneko in his lap. She nodded in return and he looked across from him at the silver-haired woman, right Roswise? Huh? Our secret weapon, remember? I don't? The Valkyrie realized all eyes in the room were turned to her and she started to shuffle uneasily in place. I'm not sure what you mean. Battle power. Secret weapon. Naruto egged her on but Roswise still looked at him blankly. He rolled his eyes, nudged for Kaneko to get off him, and stood up to face her. Come on. Show everyone what we got to see down in that place a few days ago. The others looked around in confusion as clarity finally came to the Valkyrie, as well as a rush of red and pink over her face as she stuttered, but I can't do that here. Everyone will be thrilled. And not everyone is like that. I am certainly not like that. We're in for a big fight in the future, and seeing you like that will put them at ease, trust me. The young lady sputtered and failed to form a sentence as she looked around at all the people patiently waiting to see what they were talking about. Would it really help them? Would she actually be able to ease them for the fight ahead? If there was even a small chance of it, then she had to do it. She nodded and stood up as Naruto clapped victoriously. Everyone turned to Roswise and waited for her to show them this secret. It started when she grabbed the top button of her suit and undid it. Slowly, with her face red as a beet. Roswise started to undo every button on her top until she reached the bottom. Once she did, she pulled back her jacket and did the same for the undershirt beneath it. After she had finished with the final button, she slowly pulled it back to reveal her stomach, chest, and her pink brassiere-covered breasts. The people present had already gathered that Roswise had a good body, as even the suit she wore complemented her hourglass figure and curves very well. But everyone was still shocked at just how lean her stomach was, how clear her skin appeared, and just how big her breasts were until they bounced in their tight confinement. With a burning red face and small tears in her eyes, she reached down for her pants next. She slid her thumbs by her waist and pulled down her trousers until they could spot the strings of her thong. What are you doing? Roswise looked up at Naruto's shocked, horrified, stunned, amazed, and red face as he was just staring at her strip. Everyone else had wide eyes and blushes as well, with Issei nearly doubling over by the sheer loss of blood he was suffering. Roswise hiccuped, why you wanted me to show everyone what you saw. It was supposed to put their minds at ease. I meant that I wanted you to show everyone your connection to Isobu. Confusion was the first thing that hit her. Then contemplation. Realization. Connection. And then revision. Revulsion. Regret. Shame. Disgust. Horror. Embarrassment. Loads of embarrassment. More than she could cope. Her hair shifted over one of her eyes and her other eye looked more akin to the three-tailed turtle she was bonded with, Umu. No wait. W-A-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. Rossweiss cried, and with it came a highly concentrated and pressurized beam of water out of her eye that hit Naruto square in his chest and sent him flying across the top of a couch. The Valkyrie turned slightly and dragged the water beam across the room, hitting several people directly in the face and drowning them for a moment. Once Rossweiss had finished spraying everyone in sight, she dropped to her knees and cried upwards to send the water stream into the ceiling and crashing down like rain across the room. After a few minutes she calmed down, rescinding Isobu's influence until she returned to normal. She was still kneeling on the ground, clutching her clothes to her chest and lying in 2 inches of water that had formed over the carpet. Every member of the orc as well as Barakiel were completely soaked to the bone. Naruto lifted himself up with the back of the couch and spat out the liter of liquid that had seeped into his lung. Why yeah, okay, so she can do that. Wow. Barakiel had weathered the water that rushed over him and was still seated calmly except for a blush on his face. The fallen angel took a deep breath and pulled on his collar, forcing a strip and actually complying. Haven't seen a play like that in years. Man. Takes me back to the good old days. Several people were confused and disturbed by what the man had mumbled, but Rias had walked over to Naruto while she was soaked to her underwear. She looked oddly different with her long crimson hair matted to her head and back, but she silently glared down at her boyfriend. You saw her naked? Someone's in the doghouse, Kaneko-chan, I can't believe you stayed dry. Good control of fire, Gia-kun. No one felt the need to point out the couch she had been sitting on was now burnt to a crisp. Devil. It was now the first day of guard duty with Odin. The students were away at school as Barakiel, Rossweiss, and Naruto's clone guarded the leader of the Norse gods. Azazel had taken a day off as well to guide the old man and show him around. Apparently he was going to have a meeting with several Japanese gods about joining the alliance and signing treaties. The fact he was here on a diplomatic mission for the future was actually quite comforting. Yeah, dance baby. The fact they were at a strip joint watching the old god toss bills in the air at half-naked women was just disappointing. He had offered to let Naruto, Barakiel, Azazel, and Rossweiss have some money to join. But Naruto grabbed Azazel and dragged him to an empty seat while Rossweiss desperately followed. That left Barakiel to sit and try not to stare as women shook their blessings in his face.
We shouldn't be here. I know. Azazel agreed and shrugged. This isn't a very secure position and it can be infiltrated by who knows how many people.
No you idiot, we shouldn't be at a fucking strip club. I have to agree. Rossweiss nodded, I'd rather not be here either.
Really? From what I heard yesterday you might have a knack for it. The Valkyrie blushed and Naruto punched his shoulder in response. The fallen angel gave a reserved chuckle. Relax, I'm joking. Actually we're lucky to have this opportunity, because I wanted to ask you about what it's like being bonded to that turtle. How did it happen?
Oh, she flinched and was surprised the conversation was actually going in a more productive and professional direction. Well Isobu-san and Odin-sama were talking about him sharing his power with someone, and he just suddenly picked me. He touched my head and I felt overwhelmed for a moment until it faded. Suddenly I could create water and make waves from my hands and everything. Just like that? Naruto grumbled petulantly, lazy turtle. To be fair, Matabi made a connection with Kaneko on accident. The blonde conceded with a shrug as Azazel continued. So what can you tell me about it? I don't really know how to explain it actually, it's very odd. There's a connection to Isobu-san, one I am very much aware of. But it's more of a string on the edge of my consciousness that leads me to him instead of our mind overlapping. Rossweiss said cautiously in case she screwed up her explanation. I try to reach out and contact him sometimes, but he doesn't really seem that interested. I might get a meandering groan or a yawn and he just disappears. She frowned before sitting up. Oh, but sometimes he does make a connection and tells me he spotted a fish but then he's gone just as fast. That's just sad. I'm sorry. Naruto felt the need to apologize. Not just because of Isobu's absence of presence, but because he really didn't want to be connected to any more sadness or misfortune this poor. Unlucky woman seemed to always find herself in. I'll try to contact him so he doesn't do that kind of crap anymore. She seemed surprised by his offer, and gently nodded her head in gratitude. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Yeah, kid's a sweetheart when he isn't making you strip for his friends. This time Azazel raised his prosthetic arm and blocked Naruto's punch, causing the blonde to reel back and shake his knuckles for a minute. Now about this water production. Have you tested it out yet? Your tears are super amplified and you can make enough water to soak a room. This we know for sure. Yeah, sorry about that. Do you salivate more? Huh? What about sweat? Are your shirts stained from a waterfall under your arms? I don't. What about your pee, overflowing the toilet? How could I? How about other secretions? Have you had to switch to a more absorbent patch? Hey, dance. Can I get a dance for this guy please? Naruto yanked Azazel off his seat and pulled out some money Odin had forced into his hand. Private dance. Public dance. 1 dance. 2 dance. Happy endings. Sad endings. Anything to shut this fucker up. What do you say? Man, you're like the cat in the hat of getting me horny. And more drinks to get him hammered please. Someone thankfully took the bait and pulled Azazel aside as Naruto rolled his eyes and joined back with Roswise. The young lady had a furious blush on her face as he sat beside her. I'm sorry about him. It's fine. I'm not sure if he was just messing with you, but it seemed like he was genuinely interested, which can be just as bad. It's fine, Naruto-kun. Roswise reached out and touched his arm to stop him before she smiled. Thank you. No problem. I don't, by the way. What? I don't make extra liquid when I pee or... She struggled to actually say the words but gestured to her nether region. Do that. I just want you to know that. That really ruined the mood. She does that. Odin smacked Naruto's back as he came wobbling over with a drink in hand. What's with the long face, kid?
Exclamation mark. Live a little. Those two are middle-aged farts but they're living it up. The god referred to Azazel, who is currently getting a lap dance from 3 pretty ladies at once, and Barakil, who tried to keep a stone-faced expression while a woman rubbed up in his lap. Honestly, it was amazing that he was holding back his obvious desire and attraction like that.
One of the main characteristics of fallen angels was that they didn't shy away from their desires. You're still young, kid. Get in there and pop a stiffer. No thanks, Naruto shirked the old man's hand off his shoulder. I think I should be focused on staying alert here with Roswise. Because at least 2 people should be on duty when protecting your life. Gah, how you ever got a girl's interest confounds me. The leathery geezer clicked his tongue. I don't see why you're wasting time either. We're just gonna be scrambling around in a panic when Loki shows up. Not if we're prepared. Even if we're prepared. Odin looked all too happy to pop the bubble as he snickered. Loki isn't called a god for kicks, boy.
It might just sound like a word, but it's like an entirely different realm of beings compared to humans, devils, and the like. We garnered the admiration, faith, and belief of countless people over millennia. That doesn't come to people with just any normal power or skill. If your little dragon buddy had most of his power back, we could be at ease, but at his current level I'm not confident. And considering how you currently are, I think you have some reservations as well.
Roswise attempted to mediate things preemptively, but Naruto didn't see her warnings. What does that mean? I had a talk with that big turtle bastard living at the bottom of our sea. Odin chugged his glass. He told me a little about your last battle back in your own world. It sounded impressive, with a lot at stake and a lot of power being thrown around. And by the sounds of it, it looks like you don't have any of that power inside you anymore. His fists clenched tightly as he kept eye contact with Odin. I lost my power a long time ago, and I've only recently started to get it back. I have a chance to get it back if I find Kurama's body and chakra. But can you do that in the next few days? Will you regain that power before Loki can make his move and attack me and your friends?
Odin's question lingered in the air, drowned out by the repeated tones of the music, and answered with Naruto's sharp glare. See, it doesn't matter if you have a plan to get it back or have an idea to do so. Right now you don't have it at a time when you need it most. What is it going to matter if all your little friends die because you still haven't gotten that power of yours back yet?
Naruto jumped out of his chair fast enough that it toppled over as Roswise's flinched back and Odin just stared up at him. The blonde only glared down at the short god as his anger started to reach a broiling point. Naruto, calm down. I know it pisses you off, but he isn't wrong. We need to get some of our power back as quickly as we can. He knew that, of course he knew that. He didn't need anyone else telling him that. Especially some old bastard that was just doing it to push his buttons. The thought of him failing to fight because he was too weak was plaguing him, and the idea that his friends and the people he cherished might get hurt because of that sickened him. With a growl he answered the elder god, I know all of that already, damn it. If you're so eager to point this crap out and mock me for it, do you have any advice to add to help me? Or are you just laughing at me like a prick? Oh, I'm definitely laughing like a prick, Odin chuckled, but I'm also willing to pass on some advice to you. You can't wait for that power to come and for everything to go back to normal. Until you reclaim what was yours, you need to strive for something new. Something to make up for that weakness and fill the hole that your enemies will be more than willing to exploit. In my experience, you can't just rely on one technique or one power to serve and save you in a time of crisis. It's better to have a variety to choose from in a time of need. You might want to think about how you can make up for that with what you can do now. Naruto stared at the one-eyed man intently before looking down at his own hands. Despite how much he hated to admit it, the old man was right. He was going to find Kurama's one day and reclaim his power, but he couldn't just wait idly by until that chance presented itself. Until he found that strength again, he'd have to make an alternative. Hey, don't look so dour. The youth needs to lighten up. Odin smacked him on the back, hoping to elicit some kind of reaction from the blonde. Unfortunately, he hit him a little too hard. Devil. Fuck. You seem annoyed, Uzumaki-kun. The whiskered pawn looked up at Sona as a flood of new memories filled his head. That drunk moron hit me harder than needed and popped my clone. I gotta send another one to join them again. Is that so bad? They're at a strip club getting drunk. Oh. Sona paused and nodded before humming. Okay, I'm glad it was Rias that got saddled with this and we're just the backup. I don't think any of my servants would be able to stand being in a place like that. Except maybe Saji, but I don't think he'd be proud going there. Glad to see you're concerned for us. He dryly replied as the bespectacled girl softly whistled and avoided his gaze. With a grunt he lifted himself out of his chair and prepared to make another clone to fill the space his first one left. However, before he did, he looked over at Akino's chair and noticed she had left after the class ended and their lunch break started. He looked around. Where did Akino go? She left as quickly as she could. Sona informed as he nodded towards the door. She went that way while you were rubbing your head. I noticed that she was still acting a little off. On the surface there was virtually no difference in the ponytailed woman's actions or behavior. She still had a constant smile on her face around people and greeted them with the same warm, soothing tone. The way she carried herself was still like that of a distinguished, older woman who many dreamed could be their doting older sister. To those who were looking on from the outside it was all just normal. But for those that knew Akino better, they realized something was a little off with her. After her argument with her father she retreated to her room and didn't emerge for the rest of the night. When she did, it was with that fake smile plastered on her face and intentionally ignoring any questions that were aimed at her about how she might be feeling. When she was in the same room as her father for the guard meetings she didn't look his way and didn't interact with him. It wasn't a stretch to think she refused to even acknowledge that her father existed in the same place as her. They had attempted to speak with her about how she was feeling, but only Rias had gotten any leeway in that matter. And even then she hadn't broached the topic of how she was feeling and what she thought of her father. If anyone knew her thoughts about that and what she felt, it would be Rias. Following Sona's directions he walked out of the classroom and headed through the hall. Some people nervously watched him walk by, but most of them just treated him neutrally and without note. The days where he was the biggest delinquent and unwanted factor in the school were gone but not forgotten. Now he would only really get the occasional disdainful glare his way because he regularly talked with the four most popular girls in school and appeared to have some kind of relationship with Rias Gremory. He didn't feel like sharing all the details to the general public about what they had done together. Thankfully he met Abe Kiyom along the way, the beast tamer and tennis captain, having something of a friendlier relationship with him than most, and told him where she saw Akino go. Rounding a few corners and then walking outside he spotted the ponytailed girl walking along the trees and forest. There were no people around, so it allowed her the freedom of letting the smile fade from her face. Needed some air? She flinched and looked back in surprise but eased when she saw it was him. Even though she wasn't keeping up the act around him, she didn't look particularly happy or pleased to see him either. Did you really find it necessary to follow me outside? Don't flatter yourself. He droned in response as he crossed his fingers and summoned a clone. I just needed to be outside for this. The clone nodded and extended his wings before flying away. My last clone got popped by Hentaigami and I needed to make a replacement. Akeno watched the clone fly off into the sky as she leaned back against a tree and crossed her arms gently under her chest. And, pray tell, how did your clone end up getting dispelled like that? The old bastard is a little too drunk and little too excited, Naruto said, hands in pockets as he walked over to join her in the shade of the trees. Azazel took them to a strip club and things are getting a little too rowdy. Akino's expression looked a bit pinched for only an instant before she forced it down to one of ambivalence and neutrality. Your father isn't going crazy or anything. I don't remember asking. If anything, he's the most restrained and controlled one there. Stop giving me a playback. Akeno commanded as her eyes narrowed ahead. I don't need to hear about how he's getting treated by other women or enjoying himself on the job. Are you sure? Her frown in his direction told him she wasn't in the mood for his prying or continued pestering. Naruto and Akeno stood together in silence, letting a soft wind run by and shake the leaves off the branches around them before he asked, so what is it? What did he do that has you so on edge around him? He left my mother to die and me to wander alone by myself. Her answer was enough to leave him silent and for a quiet lull to form between them. After a few moments Akeno shuffled around uncomfortably before elaborating, Odo-same lived with Okawa-sama and I in a small home away from others. My mother's family had basically disowned her for having a child with a fallen angel, so basically the only people I ever knew were my parents. Odo-sama would leave for long periods of time before he came back. Okawa-sama told me that it was because of work that he left, but he would always come back to us and see me if I wanted him to. Looking back, I felt like we were happy, content with what we had. He knew what was coming next. He dreaded to hear how it happened, but knew she had to say it. One day father's enemies got word of where we lived and made their way there. He was away on a mission, again, and told us he would come back soon. But they broke in, and chased Okawa-sama and I around the house. Her shoulders grew stiff and she was clutching her sleeves as tightly as she could manage. We had nowhere else left to go. I called for Odo-sama to come back and help us. I begged him to come and help us. I begged him to save us. I know it would be childish to think he would just appear when I called. But that's what I hoped of him. Okawa-sama pushed me away, somewhere safe and isolated, and faced them down herself. I heard it all. Akeno closed her eyes and shuddered before taking a deep breath and composing herself. She looked up and saw a sympathetic gaze coming from the whiskered blonde. For an instant an outrage filled Akeno as she didn't want his pity or charity for her life. But instead she squashed those ugly feelings and controlled herself, remembering that he had only asked, probably knowing what she was going to say. And she had still told him, feeling like she had to get this weight off her chest somehow. A small tear threatened to fall from her eye, but she crushed it with her eyelid and shook her head. I've told this all to Rias. I've told it to some others as well. They've all tried to help me. They've all talked to me and made me feel better. They've tried to tell me that hating Odo-sama for what he couldn't control or fix wasn't going to help me. Hating him and blaming him for this would never let me move on. So why are you still doing it? Because I don't want to move on. Akeno admitted. She knew how weak and pathetic and petty it made her sound, but sadly that was her honest truth. Her eyes narrowed. The people I should hate for this are the ones who killed her. And they're dead now. She was glad for that. If there was any relief she could take, no matter how awful it might sound, it was that the people that had attacked their house and killed her mother no longer walked this world. Maybe if I was rational, then that would be enough. The fact that they were gone meant my mother's death had been avenged, and I can take peace in that. But that feels too simple, almost insulting. Naruto remained silent as Akeno stepped away from the tree and looked up at the sky. If I was just to accept that it was over and she was gone, I'd feel like I was letting her slip away. The very idea of a woman named Shuri Himejima, who loved me and cherished me with her whole heart, who was wrongfully killed for something she didn't deserve, would just fade away into obscurity. The people who killed her are gone, but the people who caused her death can't just be allowed forgiveness. My father, who left us when we needed him and can't bother to face the shame. Her family, that disowned her for having me and refused to even acknowledge that she died. And you? Akeno paused as he spoke, watching her body remain still as he said, is that what this is? Punishing yourself and your father for what happened to your mother, not letting him ever forget and not letting yourself a chance to be content. She didn't answer. She didn't speak at all. My friend Sasuke, the one I talk about sometimes, lost his entire family. They were killed by his older brother. That loss, guilt, anger, and hatred pretty much changed him entirely from who he used to be. Thinking back, the bright-eyed, cocky, excited little boy in the first few months of the academy seemed like a totally different person compared to the image he last had of his friend, finding his brother. Killing his brother. Making him pay. Avenging his family. That was his entire life. He had actually forsaken having a happy, peaceful life for the chance to pursue his brother and kill him. He was going to do it no matter who he hurt. Or how much it hurt the people that cared about him most to see him walk away. He stepped forward a little so he was only a few feet away from Akino's back. When he finally found his brother, he killed him. But then he found out his brother didn't kill his family because he wanted to. It was an order. When Sasuke found that out, he lost himself again. He dug himself deeper into that pit of anger and hate. He was ready to kill everyone and everything that had a hand in it, and he didn't care what happened to himself in order to fulfill it. He was ready to surrender himself to that hatred once and for all. Hatred. Anger. Disdain. All of those feelings were so terrible, yet they were so strong and meant so much to people that it could take them over sometimes. I wish I could have told him to stop. I wish I could have found some way or some words to use that could reach him. That I understood why he felt the way he did. And that I knew he felt like he needed to do this. But that I wish he didn't turn away from everything. Akeno turned and looked back at him quietly as he continued. When we fought when we were younger, he screamed at me that I would never understand what it was like to lose people precious to me since I was alone from the beginning. Your friend doesn't really sound like much of a friend. Hey, yeah, Rias felt the same way. He chuckled knowingly, sending a little smile Akino's way that caused her to frown deeper. But I did lose my family. I met the man who took them from me the day I was born. When I did, I felt more anger and spite and other terrible things than I had ever felt before. But even then, at the time and in the battle we were fighting, I was ready to offer my hand and forgive him. If only to end a terrible cycle of hatred that I wanted nothing more than to stop. Hatred isn't something so simple. Just wanting to forgive and forget would never make that feeling truly disappear. It would just be pushed down, to repress and fester down in the depths of your mind. Akeno looked up at him. Have you forgiven him, truly? If it was still in that battle all that time ago, he would say yes. If he did it with Jiraiya in mind, the old pervert telling him to push down hatred and instead promote peace for the sake of the world, then he would say absolutely. But now, after nearly 2 years stranded from everything he knew and with time to think to himself, despite his efforts, despite the deep desire in his heart to forgive. No, he thought back to Obito, and even though he could sympathize, empathize, and even pity the former Leaf Ninja that had lost his way, he could not doubt the hate he also felt. I can't do it. I hate him. I hate him for what he did, and what he took from me. I understand, but I can't blame everyone who didn't act to help them. I can't blame myself for not being able to help in a situation I could do nothing about. He made these points firmly and pointedly, looking at Akeno directly as the queen averted her eyes from his. It happened, and it was terrible, but I'm still here. I recovered. I lived. I'm still going on. And so are you. But you can't let your mother's death be the factor that destroys your relationship with your father and condemns you to live and act like this forever. I can't just let it go. I won't let her fade away like that. She isn't fading away, he yelled to stress his point, causing her eyes to narrow in spite towards him when he pressed on. You'll never forget her. We both know your father hasn't let her leave his head. She's still with you at every moment. So knowing her like you do you think she'd want the people she cared about the most to be angry and hate each other? Do you think your mother would be happy seeing you like this? Akeno remained silent as Naruto's question hung in the air. After a moment she finally showed a reaction to his words. Her smile was gone, but all vibrancy and life in her eyes faded as well until they were just empty simple purple puddles. She spoke softly and emotionless. I don't know. I don't know what she wants. She's gone now. She doesn't get to want anything anymore. I have her memories. I have her image in my head. But I don't want that. Something returned to her eyes, but it was sad and lonely as tears filled her eyes. I want her. Is that so wrong? Akano. She turned and walked, rubbing her eyes and stopping the conversation entirely as she walked back inside. All Naruto could do was sigh and scratch his head as he kept walking outside. The memories and love for someone who was gone were wonderful and fulfilling. But it didn't compare to the real thing. It didn't compare to wanting to have your lost one back with you again. Devil, I can't anymore. You okay, Rossweiss? It's never been this bad before? The Valkyrie complained as she laid across the couch and rubbed her head. Odin-sama has always been one to indulge and enjoy himself, but this is ridiculous. Soaplands, hostess clubs, strip joints. I'm his sworn guard and protector, but I'm still a lady. I can't be seen going to places like that. Who would want to marry a lady who goes to establishments like that during the day? Well, a lot of the guys there were definitely eyeing you up. That doesn't mean as much as you think it does. Still, she couldn't hide the undeniable blush that formed on her cheeks. She sighed as she dropped into the pillows. At least the women there were understanding and considerate of me. They were so nice. Yes. Nice. Offering her cheaper drinks she didn't accept and talking with her a lot. Resting a hand on her knees a couple of times and leaning in to sit with her closer. Maybe she'll cheer up if you inform her that she was actually catching the interest of some people? I don't know if she swings that way, maybe not, but it'll probably boost her confidence. Naruto decided against it, not wishing to incite another panic attack in the poor woman. Walking over to the kitchenette, he saw most of the orc was exhausting from guarding Odin for days and accommodating his wants and needs. Nothing had happened so far, and the only thing they had to show for all this effort was repressed memories and sexual harassment. There was a sinking suspicion that there wasn't actually any tangible threat at all and the old man just came out to party. Of course no one voiced those doubts. They just thought it. Very, very loudly. Yeah, can you lower the volume a little please? My ears are very sensitive to your wails and screams. Tonight it was Issei, Yuto, Barakiel, and Gasper's turn guarding the old man while the others rested. And it was a rest they all took full advantage of, napping in rooms and relaxing while they didn't have to complete their devil jobs during this period. Did they all just move in here when he didn't notice? It was him and Rias first, then suddenly Zenobia and Kaneko had taken up rooms. And now everyone was lounging around like they lived here. Are you complaining? No, just curious. He walked around a table while Kaneko was resting her eyes. I mean, the more the merry. Wake up. You gotta wake up now. Everyone jolted up in a start as Azazel ran into the room yelling. Rias was quick to follow behind him and was speaking into a magic circle by her ear. We need to get together and get ready. What's going on? Loki's here. He just showed up by the old man and they need our help. It was a moment of complete shock before they reacted and quickly started to get their things ready. Zenobia and Irina were dressed in their battle attire. Kaneko fixed her gloves on and extended her ears and tail. Rossweiss quickly adorned her Valkyrie armor and shambled up to her feet. Naruto had made a clone and when the magic circle was finished he popped it, sending the natural energy rushing into his body. They were overwhelmed with light before they all appeared in an empty street, unnaturally void of all people or nightlife. The cart transporting the old man had swerved to the side, with Odin standing out looking up at the sky. Yuto, Barakiel, and Issei had gotten out with the pervert already wearing his scale mail. And Gasper was panicking inside the car as he anxiously looked up at the man in the sky. The man floating in the air had a presence about him that demanded their attention. The aura he released by just floating there smiling smugly at them was on a completely different level than everyone else they had faced before. It'd be almost crushing if they hadn't prepared themselves for the worst. The floating god snickered, his white robes swaying in the air as he looked down at his chief god. I see your little entourage has finally arrived. You're going to outside help for this? Not sure if I should be honored that I scare you that much, or insulted that you resorted to people this pathetic. Can you be insulted? Odin chuckled. I'd rather any choice I can make that hurts you deep, deep down. Well, while I'm crushing these little ants beneath my feet and tearing you limb from limb, I'll consider if my feelings were hurt. Loki. Azazel stepped forward and engaged the god above them. Nice to meet you. I'm Azazel, Governor General of the Fallen Angels. I know you've got a grudge with this old bastard. We've heard some of the stories, particularly the horse one. Loki's smile dropped and everyone looked uncomfortable except for Odin, who was biting his lip and smacking the top of the car. But this is the territory the angels, fallen angels, and devils have decided as their common ground. If you come charging in here to attack, you will be upsetting a lot of people. I've never really bothered thinking about what my actions would mean to chaff and expendable waste. Loki argued, if you wish this execution not to happen on your turf, you shouldn't have offered sanctuary to this man in the first place. Well, no matter what you say, just know you getting to Odin-sama isn't going to be easy. Everyone present took a stance and prepared for battle. We're ready to head you off.
Yes, throwing the lives of aspiring young soldiers and warriors away again. Sounds like Odin. His eyes surveyed the gathered devils, angel, and fallen angels before his sights landed on the red armor-clad boy. I see you've recruited the Security. Impressive, but it's clear from the air he's giving off that he isn't quite ready for a fight like this. Although if you're so keen on using a monster to fight for you.
He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Let me answer in kind. A portal opened beneath his feet as something looked to be coming through. A paw slowly emerged out of the portal. A tense air and fear gripped the hearts of everyone present and settled an icy cold in their guts. Another paw, and then a snout to follow. Finally the wolf-like creature emerged. The large beast staring the people across from it down as its tail slowly lowered behind it. It didn't seem wary or even enthralled at the idea that these people would be its opponents. That sentiment was not shared by them. Many of them had started to shake as even Odin gulped. Damn, should have figured you'd pull him out. Naruto, I know. He didn't need to resort to Kurama's ability to sense and categorize beings around him to understand what was stood in front of him. The sheer power the wolf released just standing there was staggering. Naruto had to clench his fists just to calm himself down. What the hell is that thing? Fenrir. Rias answered by his side, taking a deep breath and gulping as the beast eyed them down. A monster from Norse mythology. Said to have claws and fangs strong enough to even kill gods with ease. And one of the strongest beings in the entire world. This is a very unfortunate meeting. Don't sound too shaky there, Diedrich. Issei muttered, it's gonna hear you. That's what I like to see. Cocksureness and bravado all waning from your systems at the sight of my spawn. Loki gave a quick chortle before focusing himself again and looking down at his son. Fenrir's been raring for a chance to finally dig into you and tear the meat from your bones. It's a sight I cannot wait to behold. Why? Loki paused and tilted his head at the question posed to him. He looked around before looking down and spotting the one that came forward. A blond man with strange markings on his cheeks and an aura that blended with his surroundings. Oh, one of the chaff? I've never seen someone brave enough to step up and question me before their imminent demise. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to kill Hentaigami and start chaos? Is it because of your past together? Is that really important? Loki questioned almost innocuously. I wish him dead. But why? Why do you want him dead? Why would you want that when you know what happens if he dies? It's because of what happens when he dies that I want him dead. Naruto balked in horror at the blasé way his question was answered as Loki smiled. I hate him. I want him dead. There's a voice in my head telling me that I won't be happy until I see him dead and everything he's built crashes to the dirt. He scoffed and looked down at the blonde devil. What other reason do I need? Naruto grit his teeth and glared up at the god. This can't be real. It is very real, child. And I'm starting now, Naruto. The ninja instantly reacted when he felt the gargantuan wolf move, and the beast covered the distance between its initial spot and them in an instant. The others were just barely reacting, but Naruto's hands were already moving. He couldn't just make clones because they would get hit by the attack, which would leave Rias and the others vulnerable to take the brunt of it. He had to protect them. He had to stop it from moving. Wielding a massive amount of wind and shaping it into an orb, he created the prison around the beast that had stopped the rampaging freed Selzen. Wind CAG. The paw swung down, and the claws tore through. Devil.